We're live.
We are. Hello. Can y'all hear us?
Dang, we're live.
We are. Hello.
Cold Tourney SE
Can y'all
Corner
hear
on
us?
Dang. Yeah, that's about right. We're live.
We are.
Good morning,
Hello.
everybody. Morning. Welcome to
And one of us
People
forgot
Talk
to
About Some
mute.
Gold Cards.
All right. So good. So we're back to kind of our weekly stream and what'll hopefully be more the regular time.
Yep.
As
And to
usual.
be clear,
Yep. Go
that's
ahead.
like we're establishing the time for the first time as a regular time. So welcome to the regular time. It's this.
There we go. So as usual, you got me and Mike, but we've also got a special guest star. Straight off his appearance in the gold finals this week, we've got DB.
Hey,
Yay!
the Chicago Corgis are here. Woof woof.
Just the corgis.
Just the Corgis.
Are we keeping the other teams a secret, or can we shout them out as well?
Yeah, also the Atlantic City Angry Biddies and the Xochimilco Axolotls are also in the play. But I haven't really played the Axolotls much this year, but they exist.
Which is a shame because like even before I knew that was you, that was one of my favorite team names.
Thanks.
I mean,
try really
axolotls
hard.
are super cute,
They are. It's a great
and
concept.
yeah.
Okay, so
A lot of pride
so the plan for this week is to talk about gold, and I think gold's different in a few ways from the silver and bronze stuff we've talked about. Now, normally this is the point that I would tell you that actually gold is really a lot more expensive to run. I think as we're going to see, that's actually not true. It's actually less expensive to run gold than silver right now. At least that's what
yeah. That's I think that's true up until you start to want like the top 3 or maybe 4 tournament reward cards, which all kind of live in Hojo land, which is to say they exist, but good luck finding one.
Sounds about right.
the other thing with gold is the hitters are where there's a lot of SE hitters, but the pitchers are pretty wide open. There's not too many unobtainable options with pitchers.
Okay.
There's a lot. There's definitely a meta, but there's a lot of choices.
There are a lot of harder to get pitchers, but they're all bad, so it's okay.
Yeah, you've got a lot of choices in gold. It's a good format so far this year. I think gold and silver. There's a lot of you could go a lot of different routes with team building.
I think one other thing to keep in mind is when we've done things like the budget picks this time around, I think we have to be a little bit careful about what we call budget picks because a few hours from now, we're supposed to get a bunch of missions that'll suddenly make some of these gold cards a bit more expensive.
Yeah, that's probably true. Like, obviously, we don't have any insider information. We don't know which cards are going to blow up, but with the diamond build a lineup this year, is that right? The diamond build a lineup cards are almost certainly going to as we get these gold cards and missions to build our diamonds, they are going to blow up a little bit in price. So run out and get them now, I guess.
Or there might just be a bunch of dupes hitting the market tonight too if they do get missions. So you never know. Could
Also
go either
true.
way.
Okay. So
none of this is financial advice. We are not, et cetera, et cetera.
Nope. If we had financial advice, the main thing would be please sell me Toby Hara cheaply.
Okay. In that case, please sell me Pedro Guerrero cheaply.
All right.
I feel like we all get one. DB, what's yours? Which one are you?
I do not endorse these messages. I am remaining neutral.
Okay, but that said, which one are we selling you cheaply?
Which one do I want? I think I want. Yeah, it's going to be Hera. Hurrah! I think I'm going to start saying his name is Toby Hurrah.
Toby Hurrah.
That's how you should feel if you have one. Yeah.
So I guess as usual, let's go ahead and kind of start with some of the position players, and we'll just talk through what we're thinking. So this week, I've also made a couple of little tweaks to the model. mainly based on some of the discussions that we had, last week. And I think one of the things we found just looking at the stats is that letting the model keep running until the meta settles is probably not the best plan right now. We're probably too far away from the meta settling down. More cards are going to be released. And so what we've actually done this week is to cut the model off a little bit earlier and to try to do a better job of predicting where things might stand right now instead of in a couple of months. So we'll see if that actually works better, but hopefully what the model's doing will be a little more effective.
Yep. Yeah, and like this is a problem with any sort of like trading card based anything where the metagame's going to evolve and eventually you expect it to stabilize, and you want to be like one step ahead of everybody, but if you outthink yourself and you get 2 or 3 levels out, what's the you play yourself? Is that?
Yep.
Am I doing that right?
That's the Gen Z term, yeah.
All right.
So with
Don't
that
play
in mind,
yourself.
why don't we start with catchers? Or actually, maybe first, I think it's worth mentioning just a couple overall stats about gold. So one thing that's quite a bit different about gold than the other stuff we talked about is simply it's a much higher run scoring environment. We're seeing an ERA of about 5 across all the gold data that we've got. Just generally, the hitters seem like they're a bit ahead of the pitchers right now.
Yep, and I think this goes a lot to what DB was saying about the batting special edition cards, even the more common achievable ones, being relatively good and the pitching being relatively bad.
Yeah, I think that's right. So one thing that's actually a bit of a surprise to me is that even though the pitching's getting blown up a bit, we still find that the winning teams are running 12 pitchers. So they're still finding a way to get through without needing that 13th arm and being able to run some extra platoons. And one of the reasons that seems to be important, so we have about almost a 60-40 split righty-lefty in terms of the pitching. But the other thing that's unique is we're seeing almost no switch hitters in gold right now.
Yeah, there's very few that are worth it, it seems, at the moment. Probably Orlando Hudson is half of those switch hitter PAs.
Yeah, I guess a lot of the switch hitters that I think of when I think of gold are kind of like low golds that show up in cap formats, but not anyone you'd play in this sort of a tournament, right? Like I like Billy Rogel in golds as a switch hitter. I like Sean Figgins in a lot of caps as a switch hitter. And not just because he's a meme, he's cards just fine. There are a lot of center fielders that are all kind of the same, like no power, strong defense, switch hit, all kind of interchangeable. But yeah, nothing that really plays in the full on full points format.
You didn't say his name, so I'm going to say Spotswood Poles, just because someone had to say Spotswood Poles.
Spotswood's a switch hitter also?
He is a switch hitter.
He is.
There you go.
And I think Bill North is maybe the only one that's going to show up in some of these lists as well.
There's just a whole line of like players at exactly 80 that are switch hitters. They're like awesome for the gold floor cap tournament, but you won't see him here.
So, all right, so let's talk catchers. So as usual, we'll start with the model. Hold on, that didn't work. There it goes.
You're on the right field right now.
Yeah, it just took a moment to pop up.
We got a brief behind the scenes look there.
Yep, I think things were breaking a little bit. Okay, so here's what we got for the model. So Mike Stanley at the top. We got Mike Stanley, Buster Posey, Rick Farrell. Obviously all righties. Actually, that reminds me of a question I wanted to ask the chat because I've been playing with a local team here, and we've actually got a left-handed catcher. And I was just curious because I was having trouble, kind of thinking historically. have there been any left-handed catchers in recent Major League history?
In recent Major League history,
No, I don't think so.
it's a really good question.
There's been 3 since 1905.
Let's see, I feel like there are like 2 or 3 that everyone gets really excited when they are released in Perfect Team because, like catcher's a position that you'd really like to be able to platoon just because of how stamina unfriendly it is.
Yeah.
But
Wait, Charles, is he a left-handed thrower or a left-handed batter?
No, I was an actually left-handed thrower. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's really rare. Yeah, there's been 3.
Yeah. So there are a few guys that learn to hit left-handed, but they're batting left, throwing right.
Yeah, for gold, our left-handed options are pretty much Mauer, and I guess there's Berra, Yogi, but
it's
not really a
Mauer.
great option.
Yeah.
It's Mauer.
So the model sees a pretty big gap between Stanley and the next couple. And I think that's even with the model liking defense, I think, more than the game's WAR calculation seems to this year. But even really liking Posey's defense, the model just says Mike Stanley's a pretty clear number 1 pick here.
Yeah, that's not too hard to believe.
And if we
the bat is just head and shoulders above the other options.
I think so. I mean, Stanley can almost play first with that bat. And if we compare it with the data, the data are just telling us the same thing.
Can almost play first, you say?
Yeah.
Definitely not foreshadowing there.
Yep. So the data actually just agree with the model on this one. Stanley pretty clearly above everybody else. You need 2 catchers, so Posey's perfectly fine. If you really want to platoon, then maybe it's kind of worth pointing out that there's a little bit of a platoon split there. And so when Warbot looks versus right or versus left, it actually does suggest platooning Posey and Stanley. I'm not sure I agree with that for what it's worth. And I think the reason is even if you're going to have a righty starter, you're still going to have some lefty arms out of the pen. You generally don't want to use both of your catchers in a game, and so I'm not sure it's worth platooning for a really tiny edge when you're going to want Stanley in the late innings.
That might be true. They're just 2 very different cards. Like Posey is just great for the defense, so it just kind of depends on what your pitching staff is like too, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Our biggest winner, perhaps not too surprisingly, also Stanley. I think everyone kind of seems to have figured out that this is just a really good card.
It also helps that he's very, very gettable, right? Like he's just a packable gold card.
Yeah.
Shout out to the chat. Coach Ruffy is watching this on a 60-inch TV, so you're getting all of the details. That's great.
I think on a 60-inch TV, you can see the little grid lines in the spreadsheet.
And Kenneth86 says Tettleton, which is I'm kind of curious about that. I kind of want to try.
That's an interesting thought. Like if you really wanted to like pretend that he's basically a left-handed hitter for platoon reasons, I could see doing that.
His bat is definitely better than Posey. It just
bat plays for sure.
Defense.
So
I also
go ahead.
I also, when just team building aside, I'm a big fan. If you're gonna play one of your catchers as like the primary catcher both ways, I do like the backup catcher to also be able to back up first base, which is usually like the other thing that your catchers will be eligible for. And Stanley and Tettleton both play first, so.
So the model likes Tettleton now as the best silver catcher.
I'd suddenly have this like, oh no, does he just play right field?
No, yeah, he plays first and right.
He's good.
Oh, thank goodness.
So the model does like Tettleton as the best silver catcher here. So the model's next few were Johnny Kling, who we hadn't really talked about, Wes Westrom, and then Tettleton, Barra, and then sort of a gap to Maurer and the special edition Carter and Darren Fletcher. On the other hand, Tettleton's kind of a funny card, and Westrom has the same thing, where there's this big bat, but the avoid K is incredibly low. And Warbot really doesn't mind that. Warbot kind of feels like, outs are outs, and hey, a strikeout can't be a double play, right? But depending upon kind of the way you're thinking about running the bases and some of your other sliders, you might find that Tettleton performs worse than that because of this really low avoid K. He is going to strike out a lot. He's not going to make productive outs. He's not going to move a runner from second to third or anything like that. So it's kind of an interesting bat, right?
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
So for our budget picks this week, we went with a rough budget of about 3,000 points per card in gold. And I'm a little bit worried about saying that because, again, we're about to have the build lineups come out, and presumably a bunch of these packable cards, not all of them, but presumably a bunch of them are suddenly going to turn out to be more expensive a few hours from now, and we don't know which ones. So all of these are prices based on, what we looked up right before going on stream, and, hopefully that'll still be true. Stanley, just because he's so good, is still a bit expensive. But you can get Posey quite cheaply, and he's perfectly fine. And you can certainly run him both ways.
Yep. And I think that's kind of a common theme, right? Like, unless you're looking at the very difficult to get tournament SEs, the expensive gold cards are in the 6 to 8K range. Which, if you're committing to building a team for the format, is perfectly reasonable. Especially if you're looking to play cap tournaments as well, and some of these cards play there too.
Yeah, so. I think so. I think I have played Posey in a few caps. I might play Farrell in caps over Posey even. I think that's a better value.
Yeah, probably.
All right, so what are we running? So I'm just running Stanley. I think Stanley's the best choice. I run him both ways. I run Posey as a backup. But I just run Stanley every time he's available. And so DB actually with the Corgis is kind of working on a little bit lower budget. So he's actually got a good example of a team you can build on a shoestring budget. And what are you running here? Let's see.
The team I put together to enter the weeklies. So on the biddies, I run some gold Bo7s, and I have more cards that I've purchased for that specifically, but the Corgis are just kind of like, well, what do I have lying around that I can make a team with? And yeah, I ended up using Posey both ways for the defense for sure. But Stanley makes an appearance later, as we'll soon see.
And I think it's quite possible that Posey is actually the best catcher in the format, right? One of the things to keep in mind is that we don't really have a good sense of how much kind of the catcher ability should be showing up, and we know it's not really properly reflected in the games war calculation. Since my model's working off predicting the games war calculation, that means it's also not going to be really well reflected in my model. And I suspect there are some models that have thought more about this that might just say you need Posey's defense. That's the number one catcher, and maybe Stanley's a good backup bat.
Yeah, and I'll say too, as kind of a preface to everything else, my philosophy with building a budget team is since the big difference is really at the higher levels with the batters that are really expensive. I figure kind of focusing on pitching and defense the most is the best way to win when you have less of the good cards to force closer games and a little more random chance gets thrown in the mix.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It just kind of makes it a little bit more stochastic, and as you said, you already got yourself a good tournament reward out of this. So
I was totally going to use the word stochastic.
All right, should we talk about some first basemen?
On the offhand chance that anyone cares, I'm running Stanley and Maurer because I like platoons more than is reasonable.
I like the
I
idea of
guess
the
that's good
platoon.
too.
I think the problem is just for me, Maurer's bat just isn't good enough.
I'm running a lot of cards that I don't think are good enough because I lack better options, and I'm stubborn.
That's fair.
Not at first base though. Well, no, that's not even true. I 100% don't have the best first baseman in this format.
All right. Well, so here's what the model gives you at first base. Um, None of these is a cheap, widely available card. I'm not sure I've actually seen recently. Very early for 100, and nobody's been selling.
That was I want to say a buy order on Pedro Guerrero at 40K, and it was the highest buy order like 3 weeks ago. Um, and like it slowly crept up, and I bailed when it got to around 90. So yeah, card is just hot fire on paper, and there just aren't many of them.
And look, and winning more than one out of every 8 tournaments he plays. So
There are like two teams that he's on, and they're both excellent. So that's not surprising.
and then in second, we've got this John Morrill card, which is also quite expensive. Another kind of tournament reward.
He's not like Pedro Guerrero expensive.
Yeah, I think there's been just more morals, and it's a
Right,
great card
morals.
also for caps, especially that 82 overall. Definitely plays up.
Well,
in
and
open formats.
the 104i plays up in open formats also.
Yeah.
But there have been a lot more of them. Like you can actually buy them, and the L10 on Moral is like 30K. So like a whole other level of rarity.
It's funny because actually, at least to me, Morrill's the more useful card of the two. I find that's a card that I'll use it second, I'll use it third, I'll use in cap formats. I've even thought about using it in the league because the bat's that good when you can back up 3 positions.
I'm sorry, you said that you'd play him at third base, and my brain stopped working. Is that like you actually do that on purpose?
Hey, if you can play Bob Bailey at third base, you can play John Morrill at third base. Maybe.
This is one of those times where like things it's difficult to communicate like the dumbfounded look on my face through this microphone, but
He's not an excellent third baseman, but what he's fully trained for what he is, right?
I think I could probably play better third base defense. And I last knew where my glove was 6 years ago, so
Oh man.
He's got more range than Bob Bailey at third base. Fair enough, though. He's not a great. I agree. He's not a great third baseman.
consider playing him before you consider playing Bob Bailey at third base. I think that's fair.
I mean, maybe the better way to say it is if you need a guy who can back up a bunch of positions in a pinch, he is an eligible third baseman, for roster construction.
He is indeed eligible to play at first, second, and third. Yes. Do people play this format other than Quicks? What tourneys use gold best of 7? The Wakey Wednesday. Gosh, there are a lot more words than that, but yes. I don't remember any of them.
So there's a
that is this format.
But I think the big point is that there are a bunch of caps where gold cards are kind of right in the sweet spot, either as the top end of the cap or the bottom of the cap.
Yeah, if you'd prefer, you can refer to it as the J-Ronk, and I think people that played last year will still understand that. Likewise, you could refer to it as the Ellie Joe Medwick Memorial Tournament for similar reasons.
So, all right. So anyway,
yeah, no, it's the Wakey.
As for the data, we'll give you some data here. So there's not a ton of Pedro Guerrero data in there, and not all of it's at first, I guess. Morrill ends up pretty high. Harry Davis is up there. Hank Greenberg actually ends up taking the top spot. I think I see him more as a platoon bat, ideally.
Greenberg does have pretty neutral splits. I think he's a good, can't go wrong playing him. You can probably do better versus right, but
And just, I think it's probably helpful to call out Greenberg here too as a solid bat in the higher cap tournaments. He's a lot closer to Jimmy Fox than you might think.
yeah, for 8 points cheaper.
Yeah,
That
Harry
makes
Davis
sense.
is also really good.
Harry
Yeah,
Davis,
that is-
yeah. So the model, if we would go down the list, Harry Davis fourth, Gil Hodges, Hank Greenberg, Willie McCovey, and then John Kruk and Edgar Martinez, who we talked about a bunch in silver. Mike Hargrove. I guess that's about the top 10 or so.
Where is McCovey? McCovey is hiding behind Fred McGriff.
Yeah, I've got McCovey seventh in the model. Better as a
There
platoon
is,
bat, though, again.
Yeah, like if you're platooning at first base, I don't think there's a whole lot of reason to go get McGriff ahead of McCovey. They're very, very, very similar players.
So
Yeah, and my observed data, I mean, McCovey has a lot more plate appearances, but he's just a tiny smidge above McGriff.
So speaking of platoons,
yeah.
here's Warbot's platoon recommendations. So McGriff, I mean, that is just a great bat versus right. And we see actually that despite all of the gold options, it's the silver Edgar shows up as the best option to be a lefty masher at first.
Yeah, and that's not surprising, right? Edgar's very good, very splitty. So you probably don't want to play him full time in gold like you might in silver. But I mean, I don't have to. Yeah, those you can see the numbers on the card just as well as I can.
Yeah, I think
Huge hits.
I think really the deal is if you're willing to use a platoon slot on somebody who only plays one position, you can't go that wrong with Edgar. And first base is a great place to platoon anyway, just because you tend
Edgar
to get these huge
Martinez.
bats.
You might not realize it, but Edgar Martinez is also eligible to play third base.
That's true.
He can't be that much worse than John Morrill.
He can back up. Yeah, he can back up John Morrill for you.
Well, if you want to make Morrill look like a Gold Glove at third, there you go.
Everybody played
please
Edgar
don't-
at third. Morrill
Please
would
don't
be a
play
great
Edgar at third and complain to me about it later. Please don't do that.
I do not endorse playing Morrill at third.
So who's the winnerist?
All right.
Is it well, I don't know. It's like
The winnerist here is Harry
it John
Davis,
Morrill?
just because I think
Harry
he's the
Davis,
most
okay.
available and a darn good card.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's funny that the offensive stats, like the WOBA for Davis and Greenberg, is really close. Their on base is really close. So it's really just a nice example of coming down to team construction. If you kind of want to play like moving guys around the bases, getting base hits, not striking out, Harry Davis is your guy. If you want to just go up and try to mash dingers and
Yeah, I think the model says the same thing. The model says that it expects Davis to have a similar WOBA to someone like McGriff. Top WOBA, according to the model, should be Morrill, Guerrero, McCovey, Greenberg, and then kind of McGriff and Davis. But Guerrero and Morrill at least do a couple other things. So.
And I gotta also just shout out, don't forget my guy Bob Bailey here. Also play as a platoon bat. So
Yeah, you see a lot more Bob Bailey in gold than you might expect.
So, similarly, by the way, as far as a shoestring, budget, again, just Harry Davis is a really good card and just literally a factor of 10 cheaper than these three guys we're talking about at the top.
Yeah. To be clear, we're talking about the 75 Bailey, not the 74 Bailey.
yeah. Also, I love that Harry Davis card. It's actually doing great for me in League too. I've been playing it in Diamond this whole year, and it's
for
been great.
a long time I was platooning with Davis, and then I finally managed to get myself a Moral. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just running Moral at first, both ways. Moral also basically no split, which is really helpful. And you got something interesting going there.
Yeah, this was another kind of budget pick. Hargrove is probably not the best option, but if you're heavy platooning, he does get on base a lot, and that was kind of my guys were playing a little bit more, put together a bit more of a dink and dunk roster than all mashing. So Hargrove worked out for my team. I mean, obviously I was able to do pretty well with him, but yeah, depending on your team, McCovey or McGriff would be probably a more easily recommendable platoon bat.
And I think Stanley. So you've got Stanley platooned here. Is that also your backup catcher, or are you running a third catcher?
Yeah, Stanley was also my backup catcher, and I don't know. I felt okay with that because there's not too many left-handed starters in Gold that I've seen. I mean, there are, but it's about 60-40 split. So I didn't seem to have fatigue issues that set up, but also got, I don't know, I think there's probably 3 or 4 guys on my team that can play first base, so it's pretty easy to rotate them out if needed.
Yeah, finding people that are randomly eligible and not all the way embarrassing at first base is surprisingly easy.
Yeah, because I also have Larry Walker and Bob Bailey on my team, as we'll see. So
yeah, I think there are a lot of good choices,
fatigue
and especially if you're willing to platoon a bit, you can get pretty creative at first. So
yeah, and I'm just saying that's yeah.
As for second, it seems like it's a little bit more clear maybe what we'd like to do. So not too surprisingly, Toby Hare is really good.
Oh yeah, never mind. Yeah. That is clear. I was gonna say I didn't think it was clear at all for 95% of people who don't have Toby.
No, for the people that don't have Toby Hare, Ryan Sandberg's pretty good, but almost no one has Ryan Sandberg, and then it gets a little dicier.
Yeah. This is almost, you could almost just remove Toby Hara from this, and it would be more useful. There are that few Toby Haras. He's the king of second base, the king of shortstop, the king of third base, and if you have him, you know that. So.
And actually, I should have mentioned in the model, this is actually a tie. Joe Morgan is tied for third with John Morrill.
Interesting.
So the model just sort of says, yeah, that bat Morrill's got is so good, you can throw him at second base if you have to.
The model's got some disdain for defense at second base, is what I'm hearing.
No, I think the model just looks at it and says, Morrill's WOBA should be 50 points higher than Morgan. And 50 points is a lot of WOBA.
Fair enough.
You score enough runs and eventually you don't play defense, right? As for the data, so here's what we're actually observing. Yeah.
Tiny. Also not super common, but
I've got no idea here. So the model, let me see what the model says. Heine Groh, the model has 7th. Behind players like Grantham as well. Hudson, we got, 11th, and Noelvi Marte, 14th. Basically equivalent to running Don Money there in Gold. So the model really doesn't agree with the observed data here. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Noelvi is surprising. Hudson is solid. I think, as we'll see, that's probably your kind of default choice.
I want to say I saw Noelvi Marte come up on the main Discord at some point a month ago, and I was deeply confused as to why this was the consensus go-to player at second base. And I remain just as confused today.
I think he gets some value from being able to base run without
I mean, I get it, but like Orlando Hudson is basically free and is a switch hitter and like it's perfectly cromulent.
And I think also, and Heine Grow is actually winning quite a lot. So that's also, almost as much as Toby Hara.
Again, it's one of the cases where only a couple teams really are running him. I think in my data, there's only, let's see,
Could be.
we've got 5 different teams that have run Grow, but 2 of them are some of the best teams overall in the format. So,
I mean, I think one thing these cards have in common, that's right. CF Genesis was pointing this out too. Is so the observed data is sorted by WAR, but WAR at the position because some of these guys play multiple positions.
yeah, so that's why you're seeing Grow is not his overall WAR looks lower on this sheet because he also plays elsewhere and apparently not as well as he does at second.
I like autocorrect calling him Frog. Nice. Heine Frog. It sort of works.
Tiny Frog.
We'll go with it.
But I think one thing to notice here is in the observed data, these really good gloves are being promoted ahead of the bats. And I think this is again something where we kind of have to figure out whether that's right or whether this is kind of a quirk of the way the game is putting WAR together. But this definitely does seem to be a difference between the observed data and the model here at second. On the other hand, I think when we get enough data, I feel like if you run Toby Hara enough at second, he's going to top the list because he's just that good.
That's probably true.
That's another thing that makes it a little difficult with gold is since some of these cards are pretty rare, but our data set is, and there's only been a couple hundred gold best of sevens that have run versus thousands of bronze and iron and stuff. So we're working with a little bit less to feed our conclusions with gold.
We are, and I think that's also a case where maybe when there's less data, that makes me a little more inclined to lean toward the model here. Whereas for something like bronze, when the two disagree, I tend to lean a little more toward the data just because there's enough data to really suggest
so darn much
that's
of
the
it,
answer.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair.
Very reasonable.
Yeah, 108i, Coach Ruffy, and actually I'll show you because Warbot, if you ask him, if you ask Warbot, what do you want to run splits? Well, Toby Hara both ways, and look at that I versus left, 125i against lefties.
Phew.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's got to be pretty close to like a prime Barry Bonds, right?
Yeah, look, I'm no iologist, but that to me seems like a good eye.
Yeah.
The other one's not bad either.
That's true.
Yeah, is that his ratings for his right eye and his left eye?
Yeah, it's always it's your lead eye, right? So like if you're batting from the right side, it's your left eye that's doing all the work because it's an inch or two closer.
Yeah. Noelle Marte must have astigmatism or something.
Dude, I have astigmatism. It's terrible.
Hey, me too. Nice. High five. Oh, we missed because we couldn't see.
Oh, no.
All right. Our biggest winner, well, almost none of these cards really is being run that much. So perhaps not too surprisingly, our biggest winner is Orlando Hudson.
The least loser.
Yeah, I think Orlando Hudson's also just like good.
But a much smaller
interesting.
percentage. It's still only 24% of winning teams, which is a lot smaller than, say, Mike Stanley was on almost all of them.
Sure.
Yeah, it's right. We started with catcher where it's like pretty clear cut. There is kind of a meta there, and second base is the one where it's definitely the most variation.
Which weirdly feels like it was also the case in Silver and also feels like it's the case in like league play. It's just like there's something about second baseman this year.
Yeah, and I think it might have even really been for previous years too. Thinking about like there's always kind of been I remember with Gold last year there were several different second base options that no one was really there wasn't really a consensus on which one was.
Well, I
absolutely
think
the
here
best.
there is a consensus. It's just not available. I think Hare is
So
I think Hare is a clear number one, and I actually think Sandberg is about as clear a number two as Hare is a clear number one.
That's true.
In fact,
Um,
we'll come back to this in a couple positions, but
can I?
I think even if I had Hera, I might prefer to run him at another position and still run Sandberg at second.
Can I ask you where Warbot has a couple of other options that I think people would
Sure,
be?
yeah. The next few, so third is Morgan and Morrill are tied at third. Then we
Yep.
get Grantham isn't that far behind actually from silver. Granny Hamner, we talked about Heine. Jack
Hamner's
Doyle ends up
another SE
there.
card that is hard to get.
Yeah, yeah. Jack Doyle ends up there.
Where is
Frank Grant. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah,
do we get Rabbit Marinville anywhere?
he doesn't end up in the top 15 here.
What about
so
Michael Young?
Warbot,
I can. Which Mike Young? You said.
No, I said Michael Young because that's his name.
Mike Young.
Yeah, who is that?
It's just like Melvin Upton, right?
No, see, he actually went by Melvin for a couple years before he was like, "No, this is stupid. Call me BJ again."
Well, I've got the Platinum Series Mr. Young. I've got basically 10th, tied with Hudson.
Yeah, that's about where he is in the observed data too.
So we were trying to think about a budget pick, and actually what we came to realize is we've got a budget pick that's basically a mini version of Toby Hara here, which is just run the Silver George Grantham. It's a really good card, right? It's a
It's
really
got a
good
nice
card.
solid
It's cheap.
war of zero in our
It's
observed
decent.
data.
I think it's probably worth spending a little more here to get like a Joe Morgan,
Yeah,
especially
I
if you're the
think
sort of person for whom leaving missions incomplete will just like make your eye twitch for the rest of the year anyway. Yeah, worth doing.
Zobrist is also kind of further down. I can go not in the top 15. I can kind of run it further
I
if you
don't think
want.
of Zobrist as a second baseman really, and I don't think he plays in gold at all. But I love him in silver.
I see you're thinking about. I see you're asking about Zobrist as a platoon. Also with Morgan, it's worth pointing out for some of these Build a Legends, we just looked at what it would cost to grab the card off the card shop, but it is probably easier to build one yourself. Especially if you're coming in having ripped enough packs that you're most of the way there, right?
I don't know. There's an interesting thought.
Zobrist I have as a platoon bat. The 71 like special edition Zobrist I've got 13th verse left.
Gamba says maybe just don't have a second baseman if you can't accomplish the good at weeklies. I think that'd be fun if you could just like set up your team so that it's always in the shift.
Well,
Yeah, just slam that shift slider.
I'm just gonna run two shortstops. Like this is fine.
Can I just run Morrill at both positions?
You can.
That's immoral.
Not simultaneously, and we wouldn't recommend two of them, but the game will let you.
Yep. At least until they ban the overshift, right? All right. So who are we actually running here? Well, I was fortunate to get knocked out in the quarters of something recently and pick up a Sandberg. So that made my decision pretty easy. Until then, I was cobbling something together. And then DB, you're running Hudson, right?
That's who I got for cheap defense. Yeah, again, I mean, and short of Rabbit, he's probably the best.
Yeah.
Defender.
I will fully endorse Orlando Hudson as a budget option here.
He is fine.
He's just fine.
Plus, you're managing to get a switch hitter in the lineup finally.
Yeah.
That's
I'm running.
Yeah.
I'm running Morgan and Rabbit here, and Rabbit is just the like defensive replacement in the late innings for Joe Morgan, who for some reason has not found a glove that actually fits on his hand yet. I'm picturing him out there like wearing like cricket gloves.
Is this like Ripken, where we sort of get promised that at some point in the build a lineup he'll become a second baseman?
Kinda, yeah. Right. This is the like designated hitter, Joe Morgan, who is also kind of, I mean, he's better than a traffic cone at second base.
Rob Deere in the headlights says 3 short guys in a trench coat. I think that might be the way to go.
Could do it. All right.
Sure.
Should we talk? Let's see. Third baseman. How about?
Do I have to spend 3 roster spots on the 3 short guys, or is the roster spot for the trench coat and we just don't pay attention to what's in it? Because that matters.
Well, you only want to send one of them up to the plate, right? Because the small strike zone.
Well, how do you call the strike zone on like the middle one, right? Like, which one's holding the bat?
Yeah. All right, third base here. So the model looks at third base, and well, Toby Harris is still really good. But we've also got this Eddie Matthews card, which just absolutely rakes, and is also absolutely unavailable.
Yep, that's a depressing top 3 again.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think this is another one
of
where...
those.
Go ahead.
Of those 3, Matthews is the most available, and that is not helpful.
I don't think I've seen a Matthews actually hit the market recently.
How much? But his L10's like just shy of 50K, which I know sounds like a lot, but for the harder to get, it's not 140. Okay, like I don't know what to tell you.
Yep.
Let's look at who are the people.
So if we were to go down past those top 3, the next ones on Warbot's list, you got Sal Bando, who does actually exist. Howard Johnson doesn't. John Morrill, that yes, the bat is good enough that Warbot is willing to stick him at third base. I swear. So
Warbot
not a lot
still
of
has a
cheap
disdain for
options
defense.
there. Yeah, so not a lot of cheap options there. As for the data and maybe some guys that actually are getting played a little bit, Bob Bailey's up there. So maybe that's actually the cheaper option. Hera and Matthews, kind of as we expected, end up kind of up there. Actually, I'm curious now. Do you have any actual data on people playing Morrill at third base?
Oh, that's a good question.
That is a good question. Let's see what happens when I clear the filter here.
Figgins, the model, puts down at 13th or so, right around like playing Ryan Sandberg out of position.
I do not have any data whatsoever on that. No.
All right.
Yeah, Morrill's only listed at first, second, or DH. So if someone's playing him at third base, they're not admitting it. So if there's any cowards out there, go ahead and change your position.
All right. I think this is our challenge for chat. I want to see some people play Morrill at third base and prove these guys wrong.
Or don't play him at third and just change the position on your roster, and then it'll just make Charles feel better.
Just fake your data. We won't know.
Fair enough. All right.
What about Dragonfred says 79 Willie Jones? Do you have anything on?
Yeah. So Willie Jones. Actually, that's a good point, because when we asked Warbot, what does it want to do if you're going to run a platoon? So its platoon, of course, is going to be Matthews and Hera, but it points out that Willie Jones is your next best platoon option. And that's not a bad call. It's also not a cheap card, right?
Sure. But if you already bought one because of our silver stream, you can play him here as part of a platoon.
Yeah, I think
That,
Willie and Bando are both great platoon options. I just probably
yeah,
wouldn't really want either of them playing versus right, but
But
yeah.
Moro,
both
but Moro,
great.
on the other hand, is basically split list, so you can play him both ways at third.
Thank goodness. No, Willie Jones. Again, for people that played last year, I haven't looked at the cards next to each other. This is just based on my emotional response, I guess. But he's basically the same to me as Nolan Arenado's 79 from last year, where he just dominates silver because even his weak side plays fine there, and his defense is good. And then he plays as a platoon bat the next level up because he hits left-handed hitting so well.
Yeah, and I think he's actually a good platoon partner for something like the Build a Legend Boggs, which a lot of people are going to have, or the Build a Lineup Boggs.
Sure, yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
who, by the way, is actually our biggest winner.
Most
Again,
of
just
these
because I
lists
think
going to
because
be
he's on
tournament
all the
edition
rosters.
cards.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think once we get to the outfield, we'll see fewer. But no, that's a lie. Center field? I don't think they're center field tournament edition
Also, yeah,
cards.
the thing is too with the SC label, you're getting cards that are true, tournament rewards and admission rewards and the limited edition and now the platinum ones are also labeled as SE. So
That's true.
the
Yeah, I
SE
think.
label kind of encompasses like half of the cards
Well, I
now.
think
So
the other thing is remember that kind of the tournament cards that are coming out now, I think are intended to be still relevant a few months from now when more cards have been released. So you'd expect them to be at the top of the list now if they're still going to be at least somewhat in the meta in a couple months, probably. But I can't tell because maybe the plan instead of having card dumps is going to be more kind of this platinum idea.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I
Um,
could I could go on a whole aside about the platinum cards, but that's I think off topic, maybe a little too far off topic. So
so budget pick. I think the budget pick was really tough here because, well, as you can see, we've sort of got a limited set of options, right? Most of the top cards here just aren't cheap.
mhm.
So we kind of looked through, and we just recommend the Salbando. It's a really good card. It's a great platoon card, but you can run that card both ways if you have to.
You absolutely can. Um, I want to address Mr. Audit's line of thought here, um, and say that yes, the very difficult to find, very expensive tournament edition cards, uh, they are pretty dominant in the format at this point. However, they do still lose, right? Like this is still baseball, and teams do get baseballed very regularly. And two, there being so few of them means that odds are pretty good that you're not actually going to run into them in the wild too much. So
yeah, I was just saying
don't.
the biddies I have played 100 probably gold best of sevens at this point, and it looks like I'm doing about like a 58% winning percentage, and I only have Morel on that team.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
also
like
well,
like don't
and
don't
also
despair.
and also the team that DB's talking about here, which you're seeing doesn't have very many of these cards. That team did come in second in the weekly gold this week.
Yeah, like you can absolutely do some work in this format without any of the crazy expensive
Let's
cards.
see. Can
Would you rather
Diamond
have them? Of
Daryl
course.
Evans play in gold?
I'm not sure he
I'm
can.
thinking maybe more silver or bronze.
I'm not sure. He's the Cliff Lee of Diamond.
Well, oh yeah, my Cliff Lee actually I ran him against the gold pitchers and I don't think he makes the rotation. Uh, I was pretty disappointed to win that. Sorry, what I mean to say is please pay me a lot of points for that card. It's a wonderful card. I'm happy to sell it to you.
Yeah, Daryl Kyle is excellent. I'm pretty sure we'll talk about him when we get to pitching.
Yeah. All right. So who are we actually running here? Clearly in the future I'm just running Moral. right?
Sure.
But
Because, we've decided that's the way to go.
But right now I'm running Wade Boggs, and I am running him both ways. I think he's better as a platoon bat, but you gotta find a few places that you run the same guy both ways, and this just kind of worked out as one where I could do it.
Yep.
He's also not a great glove at third, and see that's the other reason that I think someone like Morrill is in the frame here, is if you look at who you're competing with, right? Boggs doesn't have a great glove. If you run, Hera, okay, fine, but I think there are other spots. Guerrero's a bad glove. Bob Bailey's a bad glove. Eddie Matthews is a bad glove.
Sure. It feels like the comparison that I'm coming to here is like maybe your average, let's say you've got a major league team. Most of the available third basemen that people are playing in gold are like AA or AAA fielding third baseman, and John Morrill is like a junior varsity high school third baseman. Right. Just talking about his defense. Obviously, the bat is excellent.
Yeah. But I don't think it's that bad because I think the range is better than. Well, we'll see. But I think for his low defense rating, he's actually a pretty good composition. Yes, I can play Cliff Lee in OOTP era tonight, but when I run the model, he doesn't even play in OOTP era, I think, unfortunately.
So, actually, now that I sit here and think about it, I'm saying these things about playing Morrill at third base, and I'm actually playing Chipper Jones at third base in my league team at the moment, which is probably every bit as terrible an idea. So. I'm just a big hypocrite over here.
It's the diamond one, right? Not the bronze.
Yeah. This is the Darrell Evans is hitting 120 this year, and I can't do it anymore.
That's pretty good for Darrell.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're getting good die rolls on your Darrell Evans.
How does a player have like a 135 BABIP? Like that's like Chris Davis level BABIP.
He's actually getting the ball in play. So
you mean Chris with a CH, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Chris KH. His BABIP is 247, of course.
Yes.
Well,
all right. Good. Should we talk shortstops?
I just want to shout out here real quick that I am platooning Eddie Matthews with Sal Bando and not Bob Bailey because DB told me to. And here you're running Bob Bailey and not Sal Bando.
However, I will point out that of all the players we've talked about, I think Sal Bando has the best glove.
Yeah, he's a 70 at third base, so it's not too bad.
Sure, yeah.
I will say for this team, I think I was running Bailey because he also can back up first and left, and so that's kind of what it came down to here. But for a pure,
I mean, like you always have to make concessions in team building, right? Like there's no way around that.
That's true.
Okay, so shortstops. So shortstops, maybe not too surprisingly at this point, the top shortstop in the model is also Toby Hara. So,
congratulations, Toby.
It's a really good card.
Toby Hara, good at everything. Toby Hara for president.
Toby's just a great card. So we get this Platinum Tulowitzki, which I think we're going to talk about a bunch probably later as well. Like Hera, the defense isn't great, but it's just an excellent bat and a really splitty bat as well. And then we got Granny Hamner. So again, no really cheap cards up here, right? It's just hard to find kind of these cheap infielders. If we keep going down the list, we get the Build a Lineup Ripken, we get the Platinum Dahlin, Donnie Bush, quote-unquote Mike Young, J.J. Hardy, Johnny Logan, and then you get to like Al Dark and Harvey Keene.
I haven't looked at the card. Is Mike Young's nickname Michael? Because that I might be okay with.
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think I actually own the card. Someone able to tell?
Which card did you say?
The Mike Young.
Yeah,
Oh,
quote
Mike
unquote
Young.
Mike Young. Is his nickname Michael, because I could get behind, but
Michael Young.
yeah,
So
I tried Tulo and the model is wrong. He sucks. I'm gonna tell him you said that.
Oh, yeah. We should also clarify here that Tulo is the platinum Tulo.
yeah. Sorry, this
There's
is
two
the
SE
platinum.
Tulos
Yes,
that are 1 point apart now.
the
Of course,
83
Yeah.
overall platinum Tulo. Yes, it's like exactly which year Connie Johnson you mean, right?
yeah.
Well,
All right.
those are the same overall too, aren't they?
Yeah,
Good thing they're both
I
unplayable.
feel
All
like that's
right,
just got
what
to
do
have
we
been a
got?
type. That's just got to have been a typo, right? Okay. As for the observed data, Granny Hamner's up there, J.J. Hardy, and even Harvey Keene, who's kind of a fun card. It's really the wrong shape bat for kind of everything we've seen here, right? We've generally seen that power does seem to play a bit here, especially with this really high run scoring environment. And Harvey Keene just kind of has some contact and doesn't strike out and doesn't do much else. But he does play a ton of positions. And then
Which
Hardy's probably the
really
best
does have
defensive
value.
option.
Yeah.
So maybe we got a few cheaper options there. If you're going to run a platoon, Warbot actually thinks you should come back and think about Donnie Bush again. Got all these
Yeah.
Zero
right-handed.
PAs.
That's. I always raise my eyebrow a little bit when Warbot says something like, play this switch hitter, but only on this one side. But yeah, Johnny Bush is just fine.
Well, I think
I
the
think
issue
too
is
it's
just that basically all of your shortstop options here are right-handed hitters.
Yeah, just in
That's
general.
true.
I mean, this year too. Really, most of your good. There's a lot of guys who are way better versus left than they are versus right.
Yeah, I think if you want, it looks like to find a lefty. Let's see, you can. You mentioned, were you running Billy Rigel at one point?
Yes. I mean, I'm not running him in any like gold best of 7, but I until very recently, when someone convinced me that I should be running Donnie Bush because he's 5 points cheaper and not that much worse, I've been running Billy Rogel as my cap shortstop where appropriate.
Yeah, I really like
Yeah,
Bush and Cap. And then Charlie Holliker, he's also kind of down there with Rigel, like 13th or 14th overall in the model. But again, better if you're gonna think about a platoon bat. Let's see, who's our biggest winner? I don't know. Any guesses here?
he's already over on the left, so it's a spoiler. It's Mr.
There
Hardy.
you go. It is over on the left. All right.
Yeah.
Shoestring Budget Award. Well, most of these are actually pretty expensive cards. Even Hardy is more expensive than we had hoped when we started to look it up.
But you should still go get him. He's not that
Yeah,
much more expensive.
he's in
That's true.
the Brooks
You
mission. I
probably
believe,
should
right?
still go get him. But if you really want to stick to a budget, you know what? Donnie Bush is a really good shortstop.
If you're the sort of person that likes going all hipster on your tournament teams and beating people with like random silver cards that they'll scratch their heads about, go get Donnie Bush, play him in gold.
That's true.
That's exactly that's my mo. And we
No,
have
I
zero
remember,
PA. No one has played all of my data here. No one has played Donnie Bush in gold Bo7.
No
So
one. All right.
if you want to be the very
then
first,
I think chat, we got to change. So we need someone to run Donnie Bush at short and John Morrill at third, and just show that this
and
is a winning
Grantham at
combination.
second,
What?
Yeah,
and Grantham at
And
second.
Grantham at
too, don't
second. There
forget.
you go. Yeah, I think
some
you've got
people are out to try
a
to
bunch of
win,
options.
and some people are out to try and like mess with people. That's fine.
I think
Which
you
is
can
just
win with
another way to
these.
win.
All right. So what are all of us actually running here? Well, here we go. So I'm running Ripken, and I'm kind of sort of running Ripken both ways, but I'm mixing in Harvey Keene. This is kind of really what I'm doing with Keene is trying to find somebody who can back up a lot of positions and just give me some flexibility to be able to run some single position platoon guys, which is otherwise really hard to squeeze in. I don't think Keene is anywhere close to really the best shortstop option. He's probably somewhere like 10th to 15th, and especially as a right-handed hitter, you can do a lot better. So, yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I just, again, prioritizing defense with a kind of budget build. I don't think Rabbit is a great option, but just his ability to back up second and just play really, the top defense at both those positions is pretty valuable for constructing a roster with limitations.
Absolutely
For
agree.
pure platoon, Holliker is still pretty cheap, and I think would be a better versus right, but I needed someone to back up second too, so that's why I ended up with Rabbit.
The
Yeah,
Platinum Dahlin. So I've got fifth in the model behind these top three in Ripken and ahead of Donnie Bush. I think it's a perfectly good card. It's just, I guess what I would say is that if you're going to pay kind of in that range to find a right-handed shortstop you like, I would just go get Tulo instead, or run Ripken.
I cannot recommend Tulo because of the defense. It's really bad. But if you're running more like a strikeout heavy pitchers, um, maybe if you're trying to not get any ground balls, you're just running all fly ballers and strikeout guys. Maybe you could get away with it. He definitely his bat is definitely incredible. So
Yeah, I think there's a point where you just run the bat, right? Look, I mean, it's the same reason that Toby Hara ends up, essentially the best everywhere in the infield. The bat's just so good that, he plays passable defense. It's basically like, Don Money, but, 20 points better for a few points of overall or something, right?
yeah, Rousey, yeah, very
that's good.
comparable to Don Money and Silver for sure.
Um,
And Mike Young is kind of that way too. Mike Young's kind of your poor man version of Hurrah.
I'm
Although
sorry,
he's still
who?
expensive. Michael.
Michael Young, yes.
Thank you.
I think it'd be great if his nickname was Michael Young. So it's Michael Young Young.
Did we actually figure out what the nickname
We
looks like there?
Yep,
it,
he
he
has no
doesn't have
nickname,
one.
unfortunately.
Doesn't have
Can
one.
we
All
can
right.
we start a petition? Maybe reach out to Dishnet, see if we can get Michael Young added as his nickname.
That would be great. Yeah, I think that sounds like a plan. So
Yeah, I
Let's
think
let's make it happen.
Rabbit at short is basically kind of like your equivalent of Posey at catcher, where he just
Yeah.
plays great
Yep.
defense. But
I'm running
the
Ripken
bat
both ways,
sucks.
but I definitely like having Rabbit rostered, especially if you're doing something like Joe Morgan at second.
yeah. Um, okay. So let's see. I like that. Or not Mike.
Yeah. Mike, not Mike. All right, left
All
field.
right. Let's talk about some outfielders. So, um, where we finally get to stop talking about Toby Hara for a little while. So, all right, left field. Let's see. Well, we don't get to stop talking about some of these expensive, difficult to acquire cards.
We don't.
Uh, Pedro Guerrero can play left. Gavi Kravith, the limited Rocky Colavito, and every single one of these is winning an eighth of the time we see him. Right?
They're all on the same teams.
Yeah.
It's funny because these are also three players, all of which I like better at a different position.
First base, right field, right field.
I think so, yeah. But the bats
I
are
could
so
buy that.
good, they're also your best left fielders. The problem is if we keep going, at least in the model, it doesn't really get cheaper. So we got the tournament Wally Moon, Platinum Jason Bay, the tournament Ducky Medwick. Then we get Ron Gant popping up again. So it's it's actually not so easy. Howard Johnson comes in next. So it's tough to find a cheap left fielder, I think is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
As for how we're actually doing in the data, what are people what are people really running? Yeah, it's these top expensive cards, right? Ducky ends up there. I think Ducky is better as a platoon bat, and it's possible that's the way he's being run.
I think that's true. And Joe Medwick, also unobtainium.
Yeah, yeah, he's also a tough
Oh,
card to get.
it's a new one that wasn't in the model top 3. Maybe this. No.
No, nope. It's just tough to get any of these. If you're gonna run a platoon and all these cards actually exist, Wally Moon's probably your best option with Ducky. Just because they're both really splitty, and you can see why. I mean, look at that bat you get for Ducky if you're going to run him against left. You could almost run that versus left bat and open, right?
Yeah, that Midwick is wild.
Yeah. Yep.
Wally Moon's kind of an underrated card, but also one that doesn't exist a lot. So, all
There
right.
will be some love for Andy Pafko, but he's he's an attainable bat, which means that we're grading him on a different scale.
Pretty much.
And Dove suggests Kuhn here as well too. That's also a good
Yeah, you could run Keen. I mean, the problem is that Keen really is sort of only a one-way bat, and his defense is bad. It's bad at like 6 positions, so it's a really useful card for building rosters and dealing with fatigue. But you never really want him in the lineup. All right, so who's actually our biggest winner, given that all these cards are hard to get? It's Andy Pafko. And that is a legitimate option at left, and I think especially in cap tournaments, right?
Andy Pafko is one of my favorite cards this year. The bat plays just fine in his tier. He's got really, really good defense. Like, he does not. He feels more like a high gold than an 80, just based on the numbers on the card.
I think he's basically the MVP of like the gold floor cap stuff. Him,
Pafko and Bando and Figgins and Poles, yeah, he's basically a must play in that format. I think he's probably pretty close to a must play in a lot of cap formats, frankly.
I think so. I think if you're gonna put a shoestring budget together, I think Pafko has to be on that roster. Just looking at the different positions, he's not the guy we ended up recommending in left. We actually went with we were trying to figure out, is it Dode Paskert, or we finally decided that we can just pronounce his name George, right?
Dodie.
Yep. His name's George.
His nickname is Michael Young.
There you go.
Dode, George, Michael Young, Paskert.
Yeah, Paskert's great.
Paskert, I think, is another
the only
of these
reason
cards.
I would.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's the only recommendation that I have against him in left is he's also great in center. So.
Yeah, I think Paskert and Pafko are both cards where even if you have a couple of these really expensive tournament cards or limited edition cards, you're probably still going to want both of them on your roster somewhere. They're just as swing outfielders that can play all positions and aren't horribly splitty, and you can just stick them in anywhere they're needed and they're fine, right?
Yeah, and I see what DJ Presentable is saying in the chat. I get that. I guess it's a little misleading with the data because I don't think there's a huge drop off, like really in application. I guess in the data that we see in tournaments that a lot of people are running Pafko, Marlon Byrd, Brady Anderson, and doing just fine.
So
yeah, and also
what I would
go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
So what I would say
percentages,
about that is there is some truth to that in that you, as a free to play player, you can really only invest effectively in so many things at once. So, like your resources are going to be split between your league team and, whatever tournament teams you want to be running. That said, if you are clever about it, you can put together like a pretty respectable gold team, for example, out of players that are going to play just fine in a lot of other formats, right? Like you can play 2, 3, 4 silvers here, and they won't embarrass you. Like they'll be just fine.
Yeah, I think, and gold is definitely not the best option for grinding away packs anyway. I'll just
Sure.
say that.
No,
Sure.
but I
If
think,
you are,
I think it's
yeah.
actually one where you can do pretty well in the weeklies, and also maybe another way to say it is I think a lot of these less expensive cards are a bit underrated because they're getting more plate appearances from managers that aren't really tuning sliders and thinking about fatigue and doing some of the other things.
Yeah, that's probably true.
You
There's
know,
some that show up if you just, if you hit the AI auto create a roster, it'll favor some guys like Pathco, I think probably will end up on your team and stuff. So that might be weighing them down in the observed data a little bit too.
so DJ, yeah,
And,
I think you
yeah.
definitely can compete as free to play. So for comparison, I guess the three of us are sort of a mix.
Yeah.
My team is entirely free to play and kind of always has been. We've won a couple weeklies so far this time around. One for Cliff Lee, unfortunately, and the other for Dykstra. Mike's main is not free to play, right? But is also
It
doing
is.
really, really well.
It is certainly not. I have won two weeklies, neither of consequence. One was a draft, which you know uh, maybe we should do a show on at some point. But perfect draft is another great way to learn about a lot of players that you might not otherwise have considered, and also compete on a level playing field with everyone, regardless of how much or little you've spent. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And then I guess DB, you run multiple teams, right? But the Corgi
Yeah,
is the one we're showing here. Is that free to play?
Yeah, all of my teams are free this year, and the past couple of years I've probably spent like 50 to $100 on my teams, but I'm just sticking it totally free this year and seeing how it goes. But I like it so far. I do got to say, I'm optimistic about 23. The launch was rough, but it's a fun game.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and I think we all feel a little bit differently about it, having an understanding of the pressure that Amazon was putting on the development staff. This wasn't just like Com2 US kind of ruining things at the last minute, or someone making bad development choices. This is just like, oh, a server provider has decided they're no longer providing us a server. Well,
Yeah,
that's
I'm just
awkward.
saying that as a disclaimer that I'm playing free to play this year, but I'm not necessarily like protesting or anything. It's
Sure.
No,
Yeah.
I mean,
Team's doing
I
great.
actually, I would be happy to support the game in other ways, but I found that I really enjoy, like in real life, I'm a Red Sox fan. It's fun being a fan of a big budget team, but sometimes you kind of want to try to be a small budget team and have fun with that too. And I actually really enjoy the challenge of trying to compete with a little bit fewer resources, but kind of in a game that's fair enough that you can compete with the managers that have more resources.
If I'm honest, I think I would be enjoying myself more had I not spent on the team this year. And it has nothing to do with what I perceive as like the value for the money, right? Like I'm a developer professionally. I'm out here to support a product that I enjoy, and I will do that unapologetically. But gosh, those like goofy, I don't know how I lost to this team losses feel a lot worse when you've spent money on the game, like
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
it
fair.
happens, and I know it happens, and I knew that when I signed up. But there's just something about it. It just hits a little different.
I think
Yeah,
the
that's why me
other,
and Charles
and
have fun playing
this is
Bonnie
also
Bush.
actually maybe a good discussion to have. So DJ, I think the other thing to think about as a free to play player, you have a limited budget, right? And you want to think about how can I take my resources and invest them in a way that's going to bring resources back. And there's a bit of a time horizon because every single card that you think about buying here in the long run is going to get cheaper and going to be surpassed by other releases. But in the short run is a better card than what you have and is going to help you win stuff, right? So what you want to be doing, and I think this is part of what we're trying to do with some of the shoestring stuff, right? Let's imagine that you sort of think about, okay, I think I want to get myself one gold card and really help, right? Which is the one that's worth spending up for, where the amount that I'm spending is actually going to bring me a huge improvement, over what else I could get. So like, look at these left fielders, right? Well, what we're seeing is that the gap in WAR between, say, Pafko or Paskert and, I don't know, let's say Ducky, maybe isn't so big. But when you go up to Calavito, it starts to be a pretty big gap, right? And maybe that's actually a good question we should come back to a little later. Just which of these is a place where if you're going to spend up for one card, like I think Toby Hera is clearly going to be the best card in gold right now if you can get one. It's not at all clear to me that if you had to spend 100,000 points for it, that you really get 100,000 points back, though.
I think that's probably true. There are almost certainly more effective places for you to spend that money.
And another thing I'll say,
and probably
too,
on multiple players, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is also kind of fun to just go where the cards take you to. Like I started putting together a gold team on the biddies because they won a Morel. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I have a gold card now. That's pretty cool. Let me put something together. So, you can change up what you play throughout the year depending on, if you just happen across a cool card.
That's a good question. So the data are against the entire player pool. The model is entirely a model, so there's no data in that. So what are we actually running in left? That's a good question. Realize we got.
I'm running Rocky Calavito both ways because I can.
You have the number one Calavito.
I'm running Medwick. I'm just running Medwick, so I didn't actually spend on a bunch of these gold cards. What happened was I just sort of had I suppose, good or bad fortune, depending upon how you look at it, of losing a lot of quarterfinals.
I've lost my fair share of quarterfinals also, but, what am I going to do with my third Robin Roberts?
Yeah, well, I think also, for whatever reason, the silver tournament rewards are mostly really useful. The gold ones are hit and miss, but the useful ones are really good. And then the diamond ones, I just don't think are all that useful right now for the most part.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So I'd love to win tournaments, but I think for the most part, any tournament I don't win, I'd probably rather get the silver or gold card, maybe in that order right now.
Yeah, a lot of the low diamond and diamond ones are kind of underwhelming. So
to be clear, we are not encouraging you to arrive in the fourth round of a tournament and rearrange your team so that you lose deliberately. Please don't do that. That is counter to the spirit of the game.
Well, it's also funny. Like, I definitely did try to lose intentionally one time, like 2 years ago, and I won, and it was really annoying. It just feels even worse.
I'll
like you failed at failing.
Yeah, I'll certainly admit that there are times I've been really tempted to lose.
Who among us?
I've never actually been willing to do it because I sort of feel like, ultimately I'd rather try to win. But definitely when I do happen to I lost in the quarters recently and got a Sandberg, and none of the rewards above that was better, and I'd kind of been looking for a Sandberg for a while anyway. It's like, okay, well, I'm definitely not upset about losing this one, right?
This is
this year I think they did do a much better job at making the better rewards better.
The baseball equivalent of I would never wish death upon anyone, but I have read some obituaries with great satisfaction.
Yes, there you go. Well, I think part of it's also that because there's this prevalence of cap tournaments, just diamond is, even if you have good diamond cards, it's just really hard to find a lot of places to run diamond cards and cap tournaments, and there are a lot more places to run the silver and gold rewards.
Yeah, that's a fair
Yeah,
point.
it's not as bad yet, but I assume by the end of the year it will be, where the gap between 100 and the 90 to 99 range is going to be bigger as the year goes on, as we get more power creep and stuff. Last year that was really bad, where there were hundreds that it seems like their overall rating should be like 120 for a cap tournament, but this year we don't have quite as many. Besides, maybe Hank and some of the really top
Lou
tier
Gehrig
100s, but yeah,
and maybe Bullet Joe Rogan, maybe.
I think
Yeah, Bullet Joe
Bullet and
is-
really
I mean,
tight cap formats, yeah.
I guess certainly Bullet Joe Rogan, if you put him and Shohei next to each other and have a giggle.
yeah.
So you're asking, I think Colavito's eye definitely helps, but also that power plays up quite a bit, and I think especially in the data, I think he's probably being used as a platoon bat some too. And as a platoon bat, there's even more power there, right?
Probably true. Yeah. No, Calavito is just a really, really, really well statted card. He's also, I guess this isn't relevant to the question exactly, but at an 82, he's also like super relevant in caps. So go buy one.
Yeah.
Or don't.
All right.
Yeah, Ned's busted too. That's someone sell me a Ned Williamson.
I was really close to winning.
That's an
Ned.
imperative. I've been really close to.
I was up, I think 3-1 in the finals for a Ned, and then I got I forget what it was, but not one of the really useful high diamonds instead. So
I was up 3-2 for a Ned, and I got like a Juan Pizarro instead. So that felt great.
Yep, it was like when you'd get the Aaron Robinson last year for second.
Yeah.
All right, so who do we? So let's talk center fielders.
Let's talk center fielders. This should be, I think, it's been a day since I've seen the slides, but I think this is going to be a less
a little easier, yeah.
All SE's grown kind of experience.
Yeah, so I think the reason we didn't recommend Dode and the reason we put him in, elsewhere is just because Jim Edmonds is also really available, and the model just thinks that's your top center fielder right now.
Which
Hack
is like
Hack has a
completely
great bat.
fair
Isn't
and
really a
reasonable.
center fielder.
No, Hack's a DH. Hack is a DH. Boy, what a bat though.
The aptly named Hack, yes. And actually the bat, not just the power, but also the eye might be good enough that you can get away with playing him in center, especially as a platoon bat if you had to. But I do think he's a better DH, right?
Oh, I mean, yes. Yeah. If I'm not willing to play Mike Trout in center field and silver, there's no planet on which I could justify even platooning Hank Wilson in center field in gold. I can't do it.
I mean, the Phillies would, right?
It's a hard sell.
No comment. That being said,
in
I
a world where you can play Morrill at third base, you can play Hack in center.
I cannot, in good conscience, recommend that anybody follow or take a look at what the Phillies are doing and do that. Right? Like that's just I can't.
No.
I can't.
What about in bad conscience?
Oh, sure. Like if I'm just out to like talk
Watch
people
the
into
world
making
burn.
poor life choices.
So
yeah, I mean, play Edgar at third. Like, do it.
all right.
So
So
as for
the
Grissom-
observed data, right?
Let's see.
Again, just Jim Edmonds really does come out top. This Marquise Grissom card's an interesting one, right? And particularly
Still
splitty.
relatively small sample, but
It was a small
Seems to be
sample,
doing
and it's a
good.
really splitty card. So, and then we've got really the only other switch hitter I think we've had show up in our data here in Bill North, right?
Other than Orlando Hudson
Yeah.
and Donnie Bush.
That's no,
Yes.
no. We said no one's running Bush. You should be running Bush, but nobody's running Bush.
Sure. Oh, and observe data. Sure.
Observed data, yeah.
Yeah, and I think Willie Wilson is just under the cutoff in PAs too, but he's would be in third, right behind Grissom, and he's a switch hitter.
So okay, so yeah, Grissom overall. Let me see where he is. He's further down the list overall, I think.
Yeah, again, all
Yeah,
those guys
overall
are.
he ends up all the way down at 13th, right with kind of the silver chick stall. So the next
wow.
few in the model, well, you can run Pedro Guerrero in center also with that bat.
Technically.
Pedro Guerrero, Mike Trout, Richie Ashburn, Rupert Jones, Hidalgo, who's again probably more of a platoon guy. You could platoon with Edmonds maybe, Andy Pafko. You can even run the Silver McTammany, Bill North. So Grissom.
So if I told you, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say if I told you that there is one other switch hitter that has a qualifying number of at bats in my data set, and I gave you a million guesses, I'm not sure you'd get there.
And it's not Donnie Bush, and it's not Grantham. Is somebody running Petway?
No. You want me to completely give it away with a hint?
Let chat guess.
Not
no one
Hojo.
has
No,
Hojo.
like, it would have to be a card that people actually own.
Oh, I think Snailman might have got it. Is it Asdrubal?
Asdrubal Cabrera does not show up, but that's an excellent guess. I think people are largely scared away by his defense, which is fair, right? Like he doesn't have an elite bat, and his defense is just kind of fine. I haven't seen
yeses.
I haven't seen Roush. I haven't seen people playing Tettleton, although probably he should get more play than he does. I love it as a player, but his card is bad and no one's running it. What if I told you that he's very fast?
Wait, is Brujan a switch hitter?
He surely is.
Huh.
Yeah, no, it is in fact Vidal Brujan.
See, the funny thing is, if you're
please say
run...
that's at all close to how his name is pronounced.
No, but actually, if you're gonna run 14 hitters, right, and you're gonna run someone like Keane or something like that, just to be able to back up a lot of positions, maybe having a dedicated pinch runner isn't so crazy.
It's a little crazy.
I guess when the average ERA is 5, it's a lot crazier than when it's 3, right?
Yeah, I think you could get away with like someone that could pinch hit and also pinch run, or someone that plays like outstanding late inning defense and can pinch run. But
yeah, someone more like Spotswood would.
Yeah,
because Brujan also. He is at least sort of eligible to fill in a lot of positions. So you can pinch run him and not drain the bench.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Brujan wasn't a bad option when the game, day one, because he came out. But
I mean, it's funny. He's really high on my list of cards that if they ever go to, I mean, I hate this rule, but like the whole start extra innings with a runner on second thing, right?
Oh yeah.
If they ever try to implement that, I wonder if a card like Brujan becomes really playable.
That's a fun idea.
See, Vince is an interesting option. The thing is, you can get Hidalgo for about the same price, and I think that's going to just be a better platoon.
Yeah, Hidalgo kind of outclasses DiMaggio.
Hidalgo and Dode also is very good.
Yeah, Dode is why would I put up the other? Dode proves to be our winnerist, as you see on the left there. He's been on about 60% of winning teams. So
So as for platoon bats, so this is where Warbot loves Grissom one way, right? And this is the kind of thing you start to
Sure.
think about when you build rosters is, if you're only going to get a certain number of platoons, right? Edmonds is a very, very splitty bat, even though he
Yep.
kind of comes out number one overall here. This might be one of these places that it's worth getting a card like Marquise Grissom and running him in a platoon. Especially if you've got someone like Pafko or Paskert who can back up 3 positions, or you're running Harvey Keene or something like that, just to be able to deal with a platoon that only plays 1, right? Because that's part of the problem is Edmonds is just a center fielder, right? So he kind of doesn't do some of the things you'd like him to otherwise, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I found it pretty hard to fit in too many guys who only play one position on my tournament rosters this year.
Yeah, and Grissom's doing the same thing. But if you're going to run 14, maybe you can get away with it. And both Edmonds and Grissom might be good enough that this is a good spot to think about it. Right? So I think it's worth thinking about.
Maybe I want to do that, actually. I'm just like looking at my lineup and looking at...
Yeah, the more we talk about this, I'm
Grissom.
getting tempted too. So your big winner, as you said, it's kind of given away. It is Dode or George, pronounced George.
We're going to go George.
Okay, as for a budget option, well, again, just Jim Edmonds is a really good card, and you can get him cheaply. He's packable, he's cheap. At least until he ends up in a mission, possibly in a few hours, he's cheap. Right?
And you know what? You can run him both ways. Like, is he the best yellow player in the game?
In fact,
no,
because
totally
I haven't invested in a Grissom, I actually am currently running him both ways. And you can look at the splits, right? You can see it's a huge gap. And probably the next time I try to upgrade something, finding a way not to run him both ways makes the most sense.
Well, it's really the eye, right? Like, otherwise you're just trading power for gap power, which...
Yeah,
I think you'd rather have power, but trading it for gap power, honestly, not so bad.
The other thing
especially if you've got a lot of guys with, if people are running not great defensive options and left and right, it might not be a bad strategy to go for gap power and gold.
That's a good point.
Justice for Ashburn.
No, is there a Justice card yet this year?
I think
Justice
so.
for Ashburn. Not a David Justice. Yeah.
Not a trade that I'd make.
Oh yeah, and my choice, the corgi's choice here is Devin White. He's got a very tiny sample size, but is crushing it in those views bits. So
I would go look.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I would go look to see if there is a David Justice card just yet, but that would involve going into the game, and after how last week went, I have
we'll hold off. Yeah,
I have vowed to not do that. So
Ashburn's a perfectly fine card in center. He ends up like 6th in the model or something. It's a left-handed center fielder that's not as good either offensively or defensively as Jim Edmonds, and you can get Edmonds cheaply, right? I really like this Grissom idea, though. I think I'm going to try it when I downgrade all my other defense and run Morrill at third and everything. I'm going to run Grissom in center. I think I'm going to try that.
How does Lofton do in gold? I have no idea.
I don't know.
I don't think I have any data at all.
Not all in the model, at least.
No one's been running. No one's run Lofton that I've seen, but curious. I would say his defense probably isn't that good enough. That's, again, Devin White is, from my strategy of just trying to max defense. And that's partly why his WAR is so high.
He's got huge stats in the really limited time. The other thing that I think is really remarkable here is if you look at Jim Edmonds, even though he's a card that's really widely available and a lot of people can run, he's still winning over 1 out of every 13 tournaments. And we've seen better rates from some of these really difficult, expensive special editions and tournament cards and limited editions. I think that's the highest we've seen from a packable in any of the streams you've done so far, isn't it?
Probably, yeah. Edmonds is fantastic.
I can't I have not been paying that close attention, but it would not at all surprise me.
Yeah. So I think the consensus is we like a bunch of center fielders. We like Paskert. We like Pafko, but get yourself a Jim Edmonds.
It looks like Posey
Yeah, it's
and
really
Bob
hard to
Bailey's
argue.
rate is kind of about that too. So
And as was mentioned, Edmonds is in fact a snapshot, which is its own separate weekly. So there's a little bit of extra value for you.
true.
Yep. I mean,
Someone
don't.
make a change Edmonds 10K. He'll come back down.
Well, don't take my snapshots advice because I think I don't think I've yet had a snapshots where the queuing time wasn't longer than how long I actually lasted in the tournament.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's qualified to say anything about snapshots, probably.
He is a center fielder that plays in snapshots.
He is. But
That's-
yeah, the best strategy in snapshots is match up against me in the first round.
Write that one down, everybody.
All right, right field. Let's see. What do we got in right? Well,
I'm imagining it looks a lot like left field did.
it looks a lot like left field, except we've got another expensive special edition in there in Sox.
Oh, hey, yeah.
So
That's another card
That's
that I
a-
don't have that I would not mind having at some point.
well, it's also your kind of card because he can bunt, right? And I know
Oh, yeah.
you kind of.
Yeah. Go back in time and give a quick shout out to Harry Davis when we were talking about
first,
how
second, and third, and sixth
underrated he
snapshots
is.
is really impressive.
That's nuts.
We're
You
getting Bo on
either
the stream next week.
are the person we need to learn all the sliders from, or the person we need to learn all our RNG from. Maybe both.
Maybe, perhaps both.
But I can totally match your
That's
3 first
wild.
round exits. So, yeah.
I'm
So-
imagining observed data
Observe
follows
data is
this
going to
pretty
be at
closely.
least, yeah. Observe data.
Yeah,
How is
actually,
Tony
exactly.
Gwynn here? Tony Gwynn is bad.
So I think Gwyn we've just discovered is one of these cards that sounds like he should be good and is just the wrong shape. Kind of the same way like I really wanted that Ichiro Diamond to be great, and it just seems to be unplayable.
Yeah, Gwyn has been really bad in my data.
But Quinn is it's not a good card, which is unfortunate. But
It's the low eye just seems to be kind of the killer.
Well,
for-
it's low eye
really
and
single.
low power, and as we're going to see when we talk about the pitchers, the pitchers just give up a lot of bombs in this format, and Gwyn doesn't hit them.
He doesn't strike out much though.
It's true. So, all right, if you don't have these top few, let's see. The model then goes with Gavi, difficult to get. Harold Baines, difficult to get. So probably the best obtainable card is Tommy Henrik. And let's see, Bobby Bonds, Brady Anderson's gettable. Paul O'Neill doesn't really exist, and then you're back to Pafko, who really is playable everywhere. And again, it's not a huge gap. After the first few, Pafko's about as good as most of these others, right?
yep.
So let's see. If you're gonna run a platoon, Harold Baines still shows up as your top platoon option. He's the best silver option just across the board, but he's still your best option at least one way for the dominant side of your right field platoon here.
Yeah, and again, just if you look at the numbers, it's hard to argue with.
I don't know that one of them's hit the market recently, actually, right? I think it's been a while.
Baines, yeah. Oh, he's probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks since he's been available readily.
But if you do get a chance to get yourself a Baines, it's a really good card. Tettleton for right field. The model doesn't love that, I would say. Yeah, the silver limited edition Baines.
I will recommend that you play Tettleton in right field if you hate winning but like fun.
Yep.
I
you
think
like winning
if
and
you were a
fun.
part of that demographic, you should go get yourself a Tettleton and just slam him on in there.
Banes for 8K sounds like an excellent purchase.
Oh wow, yeah.
Wow, yeah,
So,
good call.
all right. Winnerist. Well, um, that's actually Larry Walker, I think, just because of availability. But actually, you notice
Yeah,
Walker's winning about almost twice as often as a random card, right? So he's still doing fine.
and
Yeah,
I think it's completely acceptable. That's even underselling it. Go ahead and play Larry Walker instead of getting a Harold Baines for gold. Larry Walker is a very good card.
Yeah, I think you can make that work. I mean,
yeah,
the nice thing
Walker's
about
good.
Baines is that defense says 81, but it's a really good composition of that 81. So he really kind of overplays that defense. Um,
Yeah,
let's see. So for a budget pick, again, I think you're going to get all these guys at different positions, but this is kind of where we decided to put Pafko. Really, some combination of Dode, Pafko, and Edmonds in the outfield is going to work pretty well. You can get it
Yeah, I
cheaply,
don't
and
think
it's
we've
going to do
mentioned.
about as well as most of these cards anyway.
Yeah, I don't think we mentioned Marlon Bird, but he's also a good option for a very easy to get and cheap card.
He's
yeah.
cheap.
Marlon Bird. Um,
Especially, I mean, also he's very, very splitty towards left. But if you're playing Walker, I wouldn't hate Bird as a platoon partner.
That's not bad. This Platinum Bobby Bonds looks interesting to me too. If you're going to do that,
Yeah, definitely. I think you'll see in the Corgi's choice. I believe that's who I was
and
actually
and,
running
and,
with
and
this week.
actually Stanton's a surprisingly good platoon partner here too. Like the packable 82.
Yeah, no, his stats are not bad, and also possibly a good cap card for being an 82.
So
So
I do think there's something I'd point out, by the way, about these really expensive cards. They do typically come at a cost. So other than someone like Hera, most of these, like if you look at Calavito, for example, right? Calavito is Calavito's an excellent card, but he's sort of hard to actually build a team around, right? You really would like to platoon him. He kind of only has to play right, maybe a little bit of left, but doesn't play multiple positions, right? And I think the same is true
mhm.
of several of these cards that we're talking about. That they're especially if you're not willing to play players where they're technically eligible but don't have a great glove, right? Like if you see Morrill as say just a first baseman. Um, yeah, Henrik, I love that card. Henrik, I
yeah,
think,
yeah,
especially if just as a platoon bat, is absolutely fine.
yeah. He's again just one that absolutely has to be platoon. So
In fact, I mean, here's what I'm running. I'm actually running Henrik as the platoon partner for Rocky Colavito. And if you just look at Henrik's bat up against Colavito as a platoon bat, they're not that different, right? I mean, I'm not going to turn down 10 points of power and 15 points of eye, but they're pretty similar when you consider that Henrik costs almost nothing, and Colavito, if you can still get him, is I don't even know what he goes for at the moment. Is he still
yeah,
in the market?
I haven't seen any for sale for a while. His L10's 42K, but
But probably
good luck
more
finding
now.
one.
Yeah.
Again, that's I think probably the conclusion I have of this is that your corner outfield positions are going to be, especially right field, is it's going to be worth it to platoon there. You've got really good options for platoons versus some of the other positions where it's a little more even, where you could probably get away with, you know, shortstop or catcher or center. You might be able to just run one guy both ways, but you get a lot of value out of platoons.
Yeah. Yep.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so Sox, that's a good point. So Sox is a bit cheaper, doesn't have a lot of platoon splits, um,
Oh yeah,
but
sucks. Yeah,
so that's another option. I think for all these guys, though, honestly, I wouldn't pay up. Yeah, so that's a good point. You say Bob Bailey's like 90% of Colavito for 5% of the price.
Bob Bailey is 200% of everybody because he's the best card in
Well,
the world.
I'd rather play Colavito. I think at least can sort of play outfield. I think Bailey, I'd only want to play at DH maybe, but I think
I
that's
think
exactly the
Bailey's
point. Is
yeah.
if you sort of look at, as a
So
free to
wait, you want to
play.
play Bob Bailey at DH, but you'll play Morrill at third?
Yes, I will.
This is wrong, Charles. This is discrimination. I don't like it.
um,
I'm wholly on Team Bob Bailey here.
And again, the 75 Bailey.
yes,
that's true. 74 Bailey can go pound salt.
To be fair, the 74 Bailey is less splitty if you find yourself in a position where that matters at all.
But I think this is also the point of like free to play, right? So look at this platoon I'm running with Henrik and Colavito. I probably played 20 times for Colavito what I paid for Henrik, or I probably got Henrik out of a pack actually. But I'm actually getting more use out of Henrik because it's a 60% right-handed meta.
The Betamax Bailey, not the VHS Bailey. Yeah, good call.
So yeah, so I think the point again is a free to play. You can find these spots where you're not doing that much worse than the people that have Colavito, and then you find a couple spots where it is really worth investing in getting the one key card. But I'm not sure it's one of these outfielders because you've got some really good options. All right. And speaking of places you kind of want to platoon, let's talk DH a little bit, right?
Ooh.
So, as before, we've kind of tried to identify DHs in the data as best we can. For the model, we just sort of picked the best bats that didn't look like they'd be your top one or two at another position. So take that for what you will. So when the model, for example, says Morrill's your top DH, that's basically because it's pretending you have every card in the game and that you're running, Guerrero elsewhere. I think Hack is really the right answer here for sort of the top option. That bat is great. He's clearly a DH, not a center fielder, right?
Yep.
I actually don't have that card yet. I want to get a copy.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts here?
Yeah,
I can put some data up.
Sure. So
Here, I'll put some data up as well.
basically, all of my thoughts here have to do with team building and the use of the designated hitter in general, right? I feel like there are two primary sort of schools of thought, right? Like either you are attempting to use the designated hitter spot to like just jam like the best bat you can find that you can't play anywhere else, right? So like that's where you'd play like a Bob Bailey or like a Hack Wilson, or you use the designated hitter spot to at least part-time rest a player that like the bat is good enough that you want them to play every day, but either they play a demanding position defensively and you can't trust them to be doing that full time, like and still play most days, or you're just trying to like fill out positional flexibility and just kind of jam someone in there, right? Like so for example, if you have someone, and this is like a league play example, if you have a Lou Gehrig, I know, but if you have a Lou Gehrig,
or if you have two of them because you have one on an alt,
there is a real argument to play him at designated hitter rather than at first base, just so his bat's in play every day, right? So I don't know who that is in like gold, but it doesn't necessarily have to be someone like a Hack Wilson, right? Like it could be someone that's viable defensively somewhere that you just want to play, like, maybe in the field on one side and then give them a rest on the other or something.
That makes
Actually,
sense.
in
Yeah.
silver, that's sort of how I was playing Mickey Tettleton for a while, right? Like catcher is a very defensive or a very demanding defensive position. I really value the bat, so like I'll run him as a DH on one side and a catcher on the other. Anyway, yeah, Pedro Guerrero. Yes, if I had that guy, I would do whatever I could to make sure that he was in the lineup every day.
I think that makes sense. I think the other thing you can do is you can use it kind of as a swing spot. You know, so what I'll often do to try to keep all these, first base bats in the lineup is I'll kind of rotate them through, play them first base sometimes, DH sometimes. Just kind of I want them all in the lineup anyway, right?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think Bob Bailey does show up here. Actually, in the data, Bob Bailey crushes everybody in WAR. I'm guessing that's a platooned Bob Bailey though. That's
It,
probably on
it,
one side. Probably the
if
same for Hack.
if it's not, someone's an actual lunatic.
Um,
Yeah, I think that's again when you look at observed data, that's always something good to keep in mind. It's all comes down to how people are using it. So I think Bob Bailey is like pretty clearly everyone knows to play him VL and not VR.
right. Whereas I think the opposite actually, and so Warbot points out that actually your best option VR is this John Morrill card that just has no split. And then look at this Tulowitzki card. So Warbot doesn't like Tulo as much as a shortstop, right? With that glove.
Mhm.
But that bat against lefties is huge. And
Yeah,
I
again,
wonder how many people are actually running Tulo at DH right now.
very small sample size, but that 408 WOBA is pretty insane. So
It's a
Yeah,
hell of a
exactly,
bat.
Mr. Black. Not yeah, exactly. 98
Like
contact, 96 power, 87 I. He even avoids K a bit.
that's
You know,
we have and by we I just mean me and people that I've been talking with have joked a little bit about uh running the Tulowitzki as the VL DH in Diamond League, right? It's like, well,
you almost
might
can.
not
I
be
mean,
the
I
worst
think
idea.
there'd be a little, it would be memeing a little bit, but
if he had a little bit more gap power, I'd almost consider it.
yeah, yeah, which
Um,
is just like a nuts thing to say, right? Like,
but I think actually, I think this is one where I really agree with Warbot. I think I want a little more defense out of my shortstop. Because somebody's got to cover for Morrill at third base, right?
oh yeah, I mean, obviously,
But Tulo's bat is good enough. The other thing is you can actually think about some roster construction where you play several DHs and just sort of use this to swap people in and out. So just having something where the bats are good enough that Tulo can play shortstop, a couple times a week, and also DH a bunch of the rest or something. Keep the bat in the lineup. It's not bad to have a few of these options, right?
not at all.
Because otherwise,
Agreed.
it's really hard to find enough shortstops. Oh, yeah, thanks. And then we really liked your cap stream, and we got to get a VOD of that. Uh, so,
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if draft uh, nonsense is close enough to where y'all's heart is, but that would be another cool thing to see someone talk about.
yeah,
And I suspect we are not the optimal choice there. So
no.
please come make it happen.
Um, let's see. All right. So, who's the winnerist here? It's actually Pedro Guerrero. Apparently, there are just enough Pedros out there, and the people who are running Pedro are doing so well. Um, yeah, I think the conclusion is get yourself a Pedro Guerrero.
I wish that was more surprising than it is.
Uh, however, I can promise you Pedro will not appear as the shoestring pick.
That
Um,
Yep. That seems
so
true.
who do we go with the shoestring pick? Let me see. Oh,
Is it
there we
Bob
go.
Bailey? I don't
This is
know.
where we thought we'd highlight Hank Greenberg and just how good that
Oh
bat
yeah, there you go.
is. Um, just another example of kind of a really good bat that you can get out there cheaply. And you notice the gap. Look at the actual WAR you're getting out of Greenberg and out of Pedro Guerrero. It's
Yeah.
not that big of a gap when you consider that Pedro's costing what? Something, do we say like something like 100 times
Hank
the.
Greenberg confirmed cap monster.
Yeah. No, Greenberg's again a great card.
Yeah, I'd really look forward to a draft, Stu. That would be great. Um, all right, so who are we actually running? Kind of to finish up with hitters here. So we didn't talk about him that much. I'm running a couple cards we didn't really talk about at all, I guess. I'm running Willie McCovey and Edgar Martinez. Um,
We
McCovey,
talked
again,
about
if
it
you just
here.
look at him as a platoon bat, right? Huge contact, huge power, huge gap, huge eye.
Sure.
Um,
Well, I'll say again, McCovey not that much worse than Fred McGriff.
no, no, not at
Like
all.
a lot more, a lot cheaper, a lot easier to get, and not like don't feel bad if you can't get Fred McGriff. McCovey's like 98% as good.
And I actually am running him at first base a bit too. I was doing what I just mentioned, where to try to keep everybody rested, I do kind of rotate Morrill into DH, and yes, I do let him back up second and third base, as stupid as that sounds. Um, and I'm running Edgar, that 71 overall Edgar. There are more. Remember, there are more lefties here than we had seen even in the silver meta. I
Yep.
think you can absolutely get away with running a bat that good just versus left. Um, I'm not sure whether
Obviously, it
I'd
depends
rather run
on how you've
Edgar or Tulo. Actually, I
it
might
depends on
prefer
how you've
Tulo.
constructed your roster, but yeah, like especially if you're running 12 arms and 14 bats, you will almost definitely have room for at least one specialist like that, and he just mashes lefties.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
that's
I
yeah.
think if I didn't want to run Keen, then I probably would prefer Tulo. But as much as Warbot slightly likes Tulo's bat, I think I like Edgar's shape better. I've found gap power is just worth a lot with the lack of really high quality outfielders right now in gold.
See that?
Yep, and I ended up with Hack on my team.
If we have draft data, we could definitely run the model on that, right? Let's think about whether we could do something like draft next week. Um, all right, so I think that about wraps it up for hitters. Any more thoughts before we talk about some of these pitchers that are getting lit up? Sounds like no. So, all right, should we talk about some pitching then? All right. So, sounds like we might have lost a little bit of the voice from the co-host. So just give me a second. I'll see if we can get him back. All right, we're having a couple technical issues, so we're gonna take a quick 5-minute break and see if we can get this fixed, and then talk about pitchers. Let's do it that way.
Yay.
All right, I think we're back. You two still there?
Okay.
Yep.
We're all
If I
good.
still hear you mean here again.
Yeah, I think the problem was probably on my end.
I think
All
the
right.
government just doesn't want you guys to know about
Yeah. Brown, but
Dun
so
dun dun.
big
all right.
big gold is holding us back.
There you go. Yeah,
Well,
big,
that's
big
because
goal.
as much as we were talking about the bats and all the unobtainable, these pretty much options for gold are imminently attainable.
Yeah, I think there's only
There are
one.
some SEs
Yeah,
that
that I
kind of
really
the
want
same.
that I don't have in gold, which we'll come to. All right. So as I was mentioning, one change we made to the model this week is instead of running all the way and letting it converge, we've really tried to do something that's going to work in the current meta, in the meta of like a week or two from now, rather than some long time in the future. And hopefully we'll actually see this in the data a bit too, but let's find out. So here are our model's top 10 starters. Unlike last week, we didn't actually have to think all that hard about stamina and which ones are starters and which ones are relievers. Really, all of these guys have probably 90-ish stamina, except for Ed down there at the bottom, who's still in the high 60s. So every one of these is a card that you can run as a starter if you want to, right?
Yep.
We
Yeah,
noticed
absolutely.
that we noticed that the shape, kind of higher movement than everything else. Low stuff is fine. Controls maybe a little bit more important, right? And these are all guys that'll give you a lot of innings, which is why even though everyone in gold's getting lit up, it does seem like you can get away with 12 pitchers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe should we show the data and then we'll maybe compare. So
It's reasonable enough.
all right. So here are your top 10 observed, and I think this is one of the points where actually the model starts to look a little better. Because one of the things I notice here is, again, gold, we have a more limited sample, right? We were seeing a lot of people with 10,000 plus innings pitched previously. Now you're seeing something a lot smaller in terms of the sample. You notice basically every one of the top observed guys has an ERA well below their FIP, right? Which sort of sounds like it's not
Mhm.
sustainable to me. Whereas if you look in the model, actually you're mostly producing lower FIPS, with the exception of poor Andy Pettit, who's been absolutely blown up in those 186 innings, right? Um,
Yeah.
so I think maybe one good question here. So definitely the model is still suggesting that we should be running a different shape, right? A couple of these guys are in common, like Sad Sam Jones is up there in both. But really the model seems to think that movement's a lot more important than the people that are doing well in this more limited sample in the data, where their ERAs are below the FIP, right? Yeah, so Mario Soto, you
Yep.
mentioned, Johan Santana, and yeah, these
I
are
think
all top seven. Actually, yeah, during top eight SPs in the observed are all packable. Um, And even someone like Kevin Brown, I think, is at least semi-packable, right?
Yeah, he's definitely
Yeah,
not unobtainable.
I would. He's technically not packable, but he's kind of packable.
You can get him with packable cards.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
you
I
don't have to win something or pay out your nose.
Yeah.
so I think it's a really interesting question to me. You can see the model is doing something different than the successful observed data, and that the observed data, at least if you look at it in terms of FIP, maybe in the long run you might expect that if ERA and FIP are the same, aren't doing as well as the model, but in small sample sizes, they're the ones that are doing best. Um,
Yeah, I think the high movement is definitely the way to go and is going to continue to be more valuable. I think the model might be overvaluing the guys with low stuff because I feel like there are probably now more guys with bad avoid K where having 10 more points of stuff up to like 60, 70 range instead of the 50s is actually pretty valuable.
yeah, I think
I
even
feel
if
like
you're
there might be
talking
kind of
bad
a threshold
stuff,
thing there at play.
that's a good point. That even if you're going to talk about bad stuff, there's a difference between bad stuff in the 50s and bad stuff in the 70s, right?
Yeah,
Sure,
that's
for
always a
sure.
question kind of with OOTP, but some everyone kind of has different levels of what they're comfortable with. What you see in the data.
Yeah,
It
like
seems like
one.
it's really hard to get strikeouts for guys once they start getting down to that level.
Well, yeah, because like one of the cards that I wish I had some data in gold, but he isn't quite eligible, right? Is that 90 Addy Joss, where it's really basically zero stuff, huge movement, huge control.
Yeah, and he's just terrible in every observed data thing I've seen.
Yeah. So the movement and stuff, I think, is an interesting question, and this is something that almost could have a stream with itself but the wave movement was rescaled from 22 to 23. I think there's also a bit of a mirage here, and I don't want to say too much more about that at this point again because it could be its own story. But I'll simply say that all of these movements that kind of look like they're blue and look like they're excellent, if these were cards in 22, these would still typically be movements kind of in the 70s. And these would not be the kinds of cards that we think about as a high movement one. So I don't know if that means we have a bunch more high movement cards that are going to get released later, or if this is something that's intentional on the part of the game designers to make sure that power plays up a bit more this cycle, because we sort of heard that's something they might want to do. Um, but you shouldn't be thinking about like a 105 movement for Kevin Brown and saying, wow, that's like, the kinds of movements we were seeing from the top, that's a little better than Maddox and Pedro at the end of 22 or something, right?
For sure.
Um,
Yeah.
they're not
Yeah,
on the
Emerald
same
Blade asks.
scale.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're not on the same scale.
the
The highest movement, to put it another way, the highest movement that we've seen on any side so far, I think actually is maybe a card we're going to mention later, but there's one, I think, 126 one-sided split for one of these really splitty relievers. Maybe it's Tim Hill.
yeah.
Um, and I would expect we're going to see cards that are that good on both sides by the end of the game, right? So these
Yeah, I
movements
think
look
that's
high,
fair.
but I don't think they're as high as we're thinking. I think it's more that some of these low movements are really quite low and capable of giving up bombs, and that's what we're seeing when we're seeing these huge ERAs, right?
Yeah, and
Um,
definitely the fly ball ground ball factor is a big part of it too.
yeah, 1.3 homers per nine is a lot, right?
It's a few.
Um,
That's above average for sure.
yeah. So I think that's a key question, kind of which way we'd want to build. The other decision again comes down to how much you're okay with splitty guys, right? I think one of the things that we've seen again is that this AI is just not very good at dealing with splitty pitchers, right?
Yeah, it sure feels how it is.
When you're constructing a team for a tournament too, it comes down to then the kind of the strategy of like, do you want to go all in on one side, or try to split the difference and on average beat more teams kind of by not platooning as much or not having guys with as big of splits and stuff. So that also becomes an interesting consideration when building rosters.
Yeah. So I think you're seeing the most successful players in the observed data are not very splitty, whereas the model, like some players like Ben Tincup, Claude Osteen, are very splitty here, right? Donaldson's very splitty. I think also if you're going to run some of these really splitty guys, you should think about whether you're willing to run openers even if you're only running 12 and if you can get away with that, right? And in fact, if you ask Warbot, what do the splitty ones look like? If you're going to be able to run against a lineup of righties or a lineup against lefties, Tin Cup or Osteen are really good. And I think this is something to actually think hard about in some cap formats, right? We know that a lot of the best hitters in gold are right-handed. It might be that Tin Cup's just very playable in cap for that reason when you're not going to face platoons.
Sure.
Yeah, and another point, in my observed data, there's not too many people using openers in gold, so that's definitely an area that you could play around with a bit.
So I see some discussion about kind of exactly how the ratings work, and I think that's something maybe for another stream. Kind of exactly what the game engine model is, and also that's maybe the sort of thing that I don't know how much the developers are happy, having us speculate about that if we can prove our speculation, right? But yeah, in a general sense, the idea is it is some kind of comparison. Generally, against a low movement card, power is going to play up quite a bit and things like that. Yeah, that's another good point. So you see, especially in the model, we do have some reverse splits here. And that's the other reason I think it doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes to run openers, right? If you've got a splitless starter or a guy like Sad Sam with reverse splits, you don't want to run an opener. Just go ahead and face whatever lineup they put out there, right?
And on the other hand, too, it makes him a good opener for someone else who is splitty, too, because if he's going, you could put Sad Sam if the top three of the opponent's lineup is all lefties, he's fine.
Yeah, but I really like Mitchell and Sad Sam for both for both of those reasons.
Definitely, yeah. Those
right.
And those two are two of the most winning. They've been. It seems pretty proven at this point that those are solid choices for a gold team, and they're both very cheap.
I think the one I'm going to be more interested to see, particularly Mario Soto and Johan Santana, right? Both of them with that low movement. Warbot doesn't like them. FIP doesn't like them, but they've performed well in the sample size we have, right? And I think one of the things I'd be interested in seeing is when we get more data, does that hold up? Or does the ERA just kind of go to the FIP and are these really unplayable cards?
Yeah, Randy Johnson's kind of in that boat too. He's probably
except he also doesn't even have the control. Yeah. So all right, so let's see, what do we got? Some observed winners here. Well, as you might imagine, that one looks a little bit more like some of the data. The one I'm surprised to see on this list is Jake Arrieta, because that's a card I really wanted to make run, and just somehow every time he's on one of my rosters, the team falls apart. He's just like a negative clubhouse guy or something, right?
It's probably because he's a big ground baller and you're running Morrill at third, so.
Yeah, that might have something to do with it.
I could see that.
I wasn't gonna say it, but
so the moral of the story here is run a better infield.
Synergy, man.
Yes.
You got to optimize your paradigm.
So some budget picks here. Well, I think is kind of Durden was mentioning, right? Most of the guys you want here are packable and are quite good. So you got a lot of good budget options. We've kind of mentioned 5 of them, and I think it's worth pointing out that the top 2 here again also have reverse splits, and so that makes them really easy to run, right? But you got a lot of budget
Yep.
options, and even though Kevin Brown is a little bit expensive if you were to go buy him just as a card, I think the whole Kevin Brown chain is worth it, right? The bronze Kevin Brown is excellent. The silver Kevin Brown is probably at least playable, and the gold is absolutely excellent. So you probably just want that whole chain, at least to this point anyway, right?
Yeah, I would
The
agree with
bronze
that.
one's great for caps too.
Yeah, the bronze, I find myself playing in a lot of caps.
He's always been a good card, like meta card in 22 and 21 too. I think our diamond and perfect versions of him are going to be well worth it.
Just a good shape for the engine, yeah. All right, so what are we actually running? So I am running very much something like the model. Maybe the one little surprise here is I'm running Donaldson, and I am actually trying to run an opener when I run Donaldson. Um, I think it helps that not a lot of people are running openers right now in gold, and so it's worth trying it. At the same time, I can kind of get away with running the opener because the other 4 guys in that list really do not need openers, right? Maybe Kevin Brown's a little bit splitty, but that's almost it, right?
Yeah, with all those 100+ movements versus right, that's really nice. You're going to be able to deal with Hack and Greenberg and all those guys.
And
Of
you're
course,
running something a lot
yeah.
closer to the data, it looks like.
I go where the data tells me to go. Yeah.
The other one that's fun in there is Wade Hoyt, right? Because that's the one card kind of in this group that has low stamina. And often with low stamina, that's made up for by being somewhat overstated in other ways, right?
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
pretty much the only one below 86 or whatever. I guess Gale House is kind of pretty good too, but yeah, he's an extra fly ball guy. So I like him because he's got high control. You can bump up the pitch around and have him hopefully not pitch to the guys that he would usually give up dingers to.
So are you doing something special with the sliders to make these low move guys work? Are you running like a real high pitch around, or is that just Hoyt
Yeah,
because of his control?
That's usually my strategy. Yeah, I don't like playing guys with both low movement and low control. I mean, obviously, you don't. Obviously, I like playing higher stats more than low stats, but yeah, I think when you have a guy with really low movement and high control, you have more ability to control the strategy that you're using. As good as Sam Jones is, there's not really a whole lot that you can do with his sliders to he's just kind of down the middle. Like this is a good card. So I think that's part of the reason too. Like Hoyt isn't used very often, but his tournament win rate is very good too, outstanding there. So I think it's a case where people who are spending more time playing with Stark.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah. So are you finding that doing something similar to what you were doing in 22 works with the sliders in 23? Or have you kind of found you have to do something completely different?
It's interesting. I feel like the sliders are. This is completely, anecdotal. I really haven't spent any time in the sim module or anything, but the sliders do seem much more sensitive. I can't, like, if you set something all the way down or all the way up, it seems to actually have more of an effect than in 22. I feel like you could max something out and it still might not have the intended effect all the time, but this time I'm finding like if you move the base running slider all the way down, your guy's going to have just a terrible time on the base pass. Like he's just going to
I still
stand
don't
there.
I
Like
still don't feel like I understand base running.
Yeah, base running is very finicky. So I mean I do like that I don't have things figured out, and it's different than in previous years. But
I extra super don't understand.
I definitely can't tell you. I don't think anyone can right now though exactly how they are different.
And I think it's
different.
also fun here just to point out that even though all these guys are readily available, Um, we're actually running 10 different pitchers in our rotations. And I don't know, Mike, what are you running? Are you running a mixture of these, or are you running something else entirely?
Uh, man, I did not. So my sheet does not have my pitching on it. Give me like 30 seconds here, and I'll pull it up.
And that was, yeah, that's the one
I
that I put
assume you're
together
running
for the.
Kevin Brown at least, but and
I
I think
have
That's
the,
the
to
one
be
we can
running
all
Kevin
agree.
Brown.
I think the nice thing is we're running all these different cards, but you notice all of them are actually winning at a decent rate. And I think that's telling you that right now there are a bunch of ways to win in gold at the moment.
Yeah, and they're all, I mean, again, even the differences between, FIP and ERA and stuff, it's very not huge. There's not a big drop off between, the 10th best guy and the 15th best guy.
Yeah.
So it really, it comes back to roster construction and what defense you have behind them or who's your catcher, et cetera.
All right, I am running John Donaldson, Daryl Kyle, John Candelaria, Jake Arrieta, and Kevin Brown.
I see. Kyle's an
That's
interesting card. So we haven't really talked about Kyle yet. Um, that's one of these cards. So the model, for what it's worth, has him just outside the top 10. The next two would have been Henry McHenry, Kyle, and then Arrieta, Joe Benz, Candelaria. Um, I guess Kyle has really
Yeah.
a similar shape to Candelaria, right? But maybe just a little bit better because he's got more control.
that sounds about right.
And then
He's also
Candelaria is the
right-handed
lefty,
for what that's worth.
which
Yeah, and
matters.
Candelaria is
Yeah.
extremely fly ball, and Kyle's neutral, so that works in Candelaria's favor in this case, I think.
Um, all right. Well, and I guess finally we should talk a little bit about relievers, right? As tough as it is to kind of throw darts and pick out some starters. So here's again what the model comes up with for relievers, and yes, that is live Clay Holmes popping to the top.
I think that's the most fun pick of the stream. Love that Clay Holmes.
Yeah, it's also less strange than you might think, right? Like,
No, I mean you look at the ratings, and that's just an excellent card.
yep.
The
It's a
observed data,
great
I mean,
path
again,
reliever. It's I
yeah,
mean we're almost seeing Eli Morgan up here, right?
it's a small sample size, but the data, I mean, he is putting up pretty much the best FIP out of any pitcher, so
Um,
pretty wild.
but that's what the model says. Hold on, that was the wrong thing. Let me try this again. Try to putting the data in the correct place. So here's your observed, and what we're observing is actually most of the key guys out of the pen are converted starters, whereas the model almost doesn't like any of the converted starters as much as the relievers here, right? All the top 10 in the model, you saw for silver and particularly for bronze, it wanted to convert some starters. Here, it just thinks the relievers are better. And I think if you look at the FIP, that's maybe pretty close, right? This is, again, one of these things where there is a difference between FIP and ERA, and we have to figure out if it's durable. And the sample sizes are tiny, particularly on all of these guys at the top, right?
Yeah, and I think the other thing to mention, kind of what mentioned at the beginning of the stream, is that I think the using mostly starters is why more teams use 12 pitchers instead of 13, as we see in like silver and bronze. It's almost more necessary to run more pitchers with the low stamina, but I guess even though these guys are getting hit harder, they can stay out there longer too. So
I think the other effect I see is the model kind of doesn't take the starters into account, right? But what we're seeing is a lot of the lefties out of the pen are doing well, I think just because they're following righties and getting a matchup advantage, right? So we're seeing more of these lefties at the top in the observed data.
yeah, it seems like starting pitchers right-handed heavy, so there's going to be more left-handed bats out there, and then the lefties are coming in and eating their dinner.
Yeah, and I think this is a strategy that Mike's talked about, on the silver and bronze streams of, kind of
The kidney special.
Yeah, you go all one side, for the starter, and all one side for the other side for the reliever, and then you kind of force yourself to always get a bit of a matchup edge, or you force them to burn through everybody each game, and eventually build up fatigue problems in a long series, right?
Yep, yep. That's the general idea. My experience with doing something like that is that it's not. Um, how do I want to put this? It's not great to like overinvest in trying to do that, but if a lot of the better starters or the starters that you want to run are play on one side anyway, uh, maybe consider doing some nonsense like that.
Yeah, it also comes down to your tournament draw too. Like if you end up
Yeah, of course.
running all righty
Yeah.
starters and you end up going up against a team that has a ton of lefties, well then you might get screwed. But
Another thing
just
I see, there's another thing I see here, which I think is new in this data set. So you notice, as before, the model is just not afraid of picking some really splitty guys out of the pen and just assuming that the AI can figure out what to do with it, which has generally not been a good assumption. But you notice here, actually, a lot of these splitty guys are doing fine, right? Grisenda, is pretty splitty. His numbers have been excellent. Knowles is incredibly splitty, right? And the ERA is the best of the bunch here. O'Flaherty, the ERA is much lower than the FIP. So I don't know if this is something that's a small sample size, or if somehow just being able to follow all of these righties helps, or maybe even if it's just because there don't seem to be any switch hitters in gold, because maybe the manager can't figure out what to do with specialists against switch hitters or something. I mean,
Sure.
any thoughts? Do you think this is real?
I think that's a general, even real baseball truism is that you can have loogies in the pen and stuff.
Or well, that was true until recently,
Yeah.
anyway.
Well, yeah, but
But
it is
you
still
haven't been able to in silver and bronze. We found, right. We found that we looked at those guys in silver and bronze, and they were just giving up far too much. But somehow here in
yeah.
the limited sample in gold, they've been okay.
I think a lot of the top bronze and silver cards are also just so neutral that it doesn't even matter if you get a hand advantage against like Chick Hafey, for example.
Well,
Like he can still smash a righty.
yeah, but it still does, because even if even if the batter's not at such a disadvantage, the pitcher still is at an advantage, right? You kind of get both sides, right? And that's something to remember, that even with these guys that have reverse splits, they're still facing hitters that also have positive splits typically, right?
Mhm.
Um, so, all right. Well,
It's
if you
yeah,
do
it's
like
a
specialists,
yeah.
by the way, then there are some really extreme specialists available at the gold level, right? Uh,
Oh
Gerald
yes.
Knowles, we talked about, that 128 movement versus left is incredible. And Tyler Rogers, I think that is the biggest split that I can remember seeing on an OOTP card.
Yeah, that one's nuts.
What is that? 19 points of stuff, 46 points of movement, and 13 of control, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Just very silly.
Um, yeah, absolutely wild in terms of the split. And you notice Knowles, the managers seem to be able to use just fine. Tyler Rogers just isn't working, right? Um,
Yeah, that's yeah. I think there's definitely a limit as to how splitty you can get away with.
yeah, well,
For
because
sure.
that Tyler Rogers card versus left isn't so different from an iron lefty, right?
Hmm. Well, it's terrible stuff. Like I wouldn't even play that. No, I mean,
Um, all right, so I guess finally, what are we actually doing here? So again, I think the budget picks. This is one where these relievers are kind of all packable except maybe Gorman. So you can pretty much just take your pick, right? And the best of these, Clay Holmes, right? He's a packable live silver, at least for another week. Maybe he'll be. Gee, what happens if he becomes like a high silver in the next update or something, right?
I have
Boy,
I have not been paying attention to like actual Major League Baseball to that level, but
He's doing just
the,
fine in
like the
actual Major League Baseball too. Yeah.
I say the other side of that is like what happens if that guy turns into a 69 and is suddenly like an absolute terror in bronze. I don't know.
No, no, no.
huh.
He's definitely. Well, I shouldn't say definitely
He's
because you can be surprised at times, but he's on this season alone. He's probably a good candidate for a perfect, right? Um, so he should be going up. But if he manages to stay a silver,
mhm.
then I think that would be, he might be, yeah. Well, if you bump him all the way to diamond and kind of keep the same shape, he's probably playable in open, right?
He might just be.
But yeah, I mean, Clay Holmes, I'll simply say that the actual baseball season he's having, pretty much is the kind of numbers that he's having in OOTP. He's got an ERA of a half.
Woo.
Um,
Okay. All right.
yep, hasn't given up a homer on the season. 5 walks and 38 strikeouts in 36 and 2/3. So.
Okay. Dude has been doing just fine for himself.
But if he somehow only goes up to 79, even if he goes up to being a gold card and doesn't change shape at all somehow, right?
Yeah.
He's an excellent gold reliever. So, um, yeah, okay. So I guess what are we actually running? Well, so I am running Clay Holmes. I'm basically running the pen that we talked about, except that you'll notice that I've reached down a bit to get more lefties in the pen to kind of go with the righties in my rotation, and really
Mhm.
kind of try to build some kind of matchup edge in the late innings. And then DB, you're still running kind of more this mixture of converted starters, right?
Yeah, pretty much all the way. It's kind of following what the best and the observed were for this roster that I put together this week. So
Wonder how close my list is to yours. Because like again, the last time I did a major rebuild of my team, I basically did it like talking to you and frantically getting it in before the wakey wakey 2 weeks ago.
you gotta wake.
You gotta. So yeah, like I'm running like
I
side
will
Sam Jones and Earl
say
Hamilton there as well.
is as one of the one of the Europeans on here. I mean, you can tell from my accent probably I'm an American, but living in Europe, I really appreciate things like the wakey wakey actually being like a lunchy lunchy.
Yeah, I suppose that's true, huh?
That's not a Denmark accent, Charles.
No, no, afraid it's
Cool.
not. And you really don't want to hear me try to speak Danish.
I don't know that I particularly want to hear anyone try and speak Danish. It just makes my head hurt.
Mine too.
It's a heroic attack. Mike
It's a
Young
tough
Paul.
language. So
Yeah, like absolutely nothing against the Danes. It's just, yeah.
They make a good cheesy breakfast pastry. I gotta say.
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
funny actually because in Danish we call that wienerbrød, like from Vienna.
Sure.
So it's not a Danish here. It's a Viennese thing. And in Vienna, I'm trying to remember they call it something else also. So they
the
also don't
Royale
claim
with
it as local.
cheese.
I bet Google knows what
Um,
is a Danish
yes. So
called in Vienna.
anyway, yeah. So I think
Oh,
that's
it's
kind
called
of
a
what.
Copenhagener Plunder, which is like weirdly more specific than Danish.
Yes.
That's great.
So, all right. So I think that's probably a sum up of kind of what we're thinking on gold at the moment. Any final thoughts or kind of questions? I mean, I think one thing I'll mention is I think as we've gone through, yes, there are a few expensive cards that are great, but I think on balance you can assemble a quality gold roster, including some good cap pieces, cheaper than you can assemble a top silver roster. And so
Yeah,
I
I
hope
think
we'll
that's
see if a
absolutely
few more
true.
people think about playing gold.
I think
Yeah,
that's
I
absolutely
know.
true.
I'm here for living proof. My team finished second in the weekly. Was it yesterday? Yesterday, and it does not have any of these fancy schmancy SEs and stuff. So it's possible.
I think,
Yeah, there's not as big of a difference as you might despairingly think.
and I think also if you are at all thinking about like running out and getting a handful of these gold cards, um, I would, seriously think about trying to get a couple in the next 2 hours if you can get them cheaply, just in case they do end up in missions. We know there are going to be a bunch of gold cards that suddenly end up in missions pretty soon, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Well, we strongly
And
think so.
to be clear, this is not us thinking that we're going to have that big an effect on the market just by talking about the cards, right? Like
Yeah.
I,
You'll
I
still
three
hope.
want to get
hours,
Clay Holmes.
3.5 hours from now, the market will hopefully, I think, is a fine thing to say. Will
The
hopefully
game
start to do some things.
the game changes forever tonight.
It really does. I forget whose catchphrase that was, but it is still true.
Oh, it's intellectual property of Arby's.
Ah,
Yeah.
as in the ones that have the meats.
It changes forever until the next week when it changes forever again.
Yeah.
Well, it was still changed forever. Like we're not changing it back. Oh, that'd be something.
Well,
Like
except for the platinum
we
cards.
just we have a Thursday where Dish comes out and he's like, "This week we're taking away your cards. Like you got some missions to remove your cards from the game." Dang,
The dang government's come to take my cards, man.
not my
Lefty Gomez. Let
cards.
me see. I don't have Lefty Gomez in the top 25 or so. I'll see if I'll run it a little deeper. Do you have him in your data?
Yeah, I don't think he's very good. Let me double check and make sure I'm not
It's one of
getting
those
Google
cards that
players
just
right.
feels like it's the wrong shape for this meta, right?
Yeah, yeah. In 2000 batters faced, he's got an ERA a little over 5.5 in my data at least. So ERA and FIP both about there.
Yeah, bunch of strikeouts, I guess. But
Yeah. Again, it's not, and even then, like the guys who rank pretty low, there's just it's a very small spectrum. There's not a huge difference. So like, yeah, you're going to be better off running someone else in the long run, but on an individual basis, you're not going to necessarily lose because you use Lefty Gomez instead.
yeah,
It's
sounds about right.
half a run of ERA different from some guys who are, good options.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, sounds good. Any other general advice you've got? Kind of as the guest, doesn't have to be about gold, but any other general advice for
You have any
kind
life
of.
advice for me, DB?
So I don't want to give away any of my secrets, too much, so I can actually win some of these SE cards and get to use them before the year's over. But I think, yeah, we covered a lot of stuff, and I think gold's fun. Go out and play some.
Okay, great. Then I think this is probably a good place to wrap up. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming, and hopefully we see more of you beating us in gold. So
Yeah, that's what I want to say. Thanks for everybody for
I
watching.
love
This was
losing in
fun.
gold.
I at least want to lose to some different teams.
Yeah,
I'm
keep swinging for the
given to
fences.
believe that we can't make any statements regarding fences and whether or not you should swing for them for legal reasons.
So, all right, thanks a lot, guys. Hopefully, see you next week around this time when I guess we'll figure out what we're
And
doing. If someone
say,
does want to
as
send us a
always,
bunch of draft data, that could be fun.
Yeah, as always, if you have a format that you'd like us to talk about, please reach out on Discord to any one of us, and yeah, we'll be happy to give it a look.
Keep fencing for the swings.
I think if we don't have any better ideas, we may take a look at Iron next week. Low Diamond would be pretty fun, but it doesn't fire often enough to get significant data just yet. So
Yeah. I have almost all of the low diamond data that you can have, so I'll have to come back on for that, but might give
maybe
that a minute.
I don't know. Maybe we'll set up a poll or something.
Yeah, if we could get enough data, what I'd like to do is do something with the new live cards, but we'd have to find a way to get enough data.
Oh yeah.
All right.
All right.
Well, this was fun. Good talking, everybody.
Thanks for coming, DB.
Thanks for being here.
Go real corgis, I guess.
Yeah. Go corgis. Go.
All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. See y'all next week.
Keep fencing.